Hello, tier listing tubers, and welcome back to Let's Talk About Final Fantasy Renaissance with me, BlueAnkylo. So first off, if everything goes according to plan, this episode should be going live around Christmas Eve or Christmas morning. So you're Merry Holidays, Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas, even if it's not your thing. But for me, it's your Christmas present from Blue. That said, I am recording this after recording more episodes that haven't been released yet. So we're going to talk about some spoilers for some of these characters, although I won't obviously reveal the entire outcome of certain runs. But if you're really worried about spoilers and knowing which playthroughs are coming up, I will definitely be referencing them a little bit during this tier list process. So just the nature of doing things out of order. I don't usually do it, but hey, this is an opportunity for a present. So that said, we're going to use, I'll show you the setup here. We're going to use a tier maker list. This is just tiermaker.com, very easy to find. And I've got each of the jobs, each of the 18 jobs. And we'll talk about kind of my criteria for how I'm going to rank them briefly. And honestly, you know me, I'm going to chat about these guys a lot. I'm going to do the tier listing first, and then I think at the end I'm going to talk about, especially the ones at the low end, I might even add some more ranks if it gets really bad, what I think they need to fix them, or at least make them more compatible, more competitive to the higher ranked ones. Music is going to be from the Pixel Remaster Final Fantasy games. Although I'm going to turn it down just a little bit, make sure my audio balance is hopefully workable. Still might be a little bit loud, but hey, it's all good. I'll just talk loudly. Okay, so I'm going to be switching back and forth between the games, because the last tier list I made people mention that they'd rather see the game rather than just a tier list, so okay. When I'm talking about the fighter, I will pull open the fighter in the game. I don't have a save file with a bunch of... well, technically I do, but I'm not going to be switching around save games. Now, for the tier list, I do have some general guidelines for how I'm going to rank them, basically. So, first and foremost, we're talking Renaissance mode. Not specifically New Game Plus mode. In Classic mode, they play basically the same as the NES version. Now, I will basically say the NES version is like my baseline that we're comparing them with. In the baseline, however you make a tier list for the first 6 jobs, the Thief is at the bottom, the Fighter is at the top, and then you kind of mix and match in the middle. Usually White Mage is a little bit above Thief, but not super useful. And then Black Belt is, depending on how much grinding you want to do, put them closer to Fighter or closer to White Mage. And then Red Mage is probably just a little bit behind Fighter, and Black Mage is generally a little bit below Red Mage. So it usually goes Fighter, Red, Black Belt somewhere around there, Black, White, Thief, as far as I'm concerned. And the Thief is way, way below the rest. And honestly, the middle section you can kind of move around, because Black Belt can be entirely useless or very awesome, depending on how much grinding you do. But that's the simple thing. We're not talking about the NES version, but I will be using their effective contributions, even though the Renaissance version of the same classes are different. But I'll be basically using the baseline of how good a character is compared to the NES original, because that makes sense to me. I'm going to be assuming, for the most part, that the job we're talking about is part of a 4-person team, and I will discuss sort of their synergies or anti-synergies, because some of them work a lot better with certain teammates, which makes them easier to bring on your team. At the end of the day, this is to say how good are they to pick to join your team. Not how to make the perfect optimal party. The top 4 on this list are not necessarily the most optimum party, but they are my evaluation of what strong characters are. Contribution level is just like how much they do for the team. Classically, the Fighter kills everything and takes a lot of damage and protects people and just wins you the game. Vulnerability level, hey, you know that Black Mage doesn't have very much hit points. He dies to everything. Or maybe you could say a downside for the original Fighter is they don't run away very well from battle. Stuff like that. But some characters have relatively large vulnerabilities, usually in the survivability realm, whereas their contributions maybe don't keep up to the amount of difficulty they are. Ease of use is... these are ranked approximately in order of importance, too. Ease of use is just how easy it is to use them, obviously. It doesn't mean that they're bad or good on their own, but the more difficult they are to set up, and this tends to happen when we're talking about needing turns to set up, to charge up, to do cool things. They rely on other things to proc their abilities. That's going to knock them down a couple points in my estimation, because the best character doesn't take a lot of setup and just kills everything. And we have characters just like that. So another character that is competing with someone who just presses A to delete something, but you have to press A and, you know, add a couple spells, and it only works in certain situations, and then they kill something equally good, they're definitely below that first character that just pressed fight and killed them, basically. So fighters, obviously very easy to use. Black mage is like this too. You just press fire to kill things. Sure, you got to memorize some resistances and weaknesses a little bit, so it's not super easy, but you just blast them, cast nuke, kill stuff. Some of the new classes can do nuke level damage, but it's not as straightforward, so it's a downgrade. Unless they do something else advantageous. Synergies and anti-synergies are really cool, and I will try to talk about them when I know about them. I will profess that I am not, the god of Final Fantasy Renaissance. I know a lot. I've played quite a few runs at this point, but my thinking may change over time as I get more experience. And of course, we're on version 2.1.3, as you can see. So as the edition comes up, things will get rebalanced. There will be new jobs. It doesn't mean this will last forever, and I might change my mind. So if you have comments, you might be able to convince me to up or down someone a little bit. These are just my personal opinions at the end of the day, based on my experiences. And I mean, you want to do the calculation, how many 4-man parties out of 18 people, including duplicates, like 2 fighters and 2 thieves? I'm not going to run it through the calculator right now, but there's probably, I'm going to say billions or trillions or even higher total combinations. 18 PR, 18 P4, I forget the combo on the calculator. It's permutations of 4 out of 18. It's a lot. It's a lot. Or combination. It's been a long time since I took stats, okay, guys? But the idea is it's a lot. So no one will ever play every single combination of 4 in Renaissance. It's never happened. Anyway, that said, I will try to talk about some synergies and anti-synergies that I'm aware of, and I will take New Game Plus or solo runs into a small measure at the bottom of the tier list. Not that I'm ranking them based on how, like, that would be a different tier list to be like, how good are these solo? What's the worst and best solo character to run? Dragoon and Time Mage at the top. Thief, Evoker, there's a couple others at the bottom. Bard was pretty bad. There are a few that are really bad to run solo, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're bad in your 4-man team, which is what we're talking about here. So suffice to say, that's my general guideline. I may forget about that in 5 minutes. So, Renaissance 2.1.3. We're going to start. I'm just going to make temporary games here just to show you. And I don't know if I'm going to consider their promotion stats very much. The main thing in Renaissance, or any NES FF1, unfortunately, the game has the opposite difficulty curve where it starts very difficult and gets easier. By the time you can promote, you've got the airship, you can go to the Dragoon, you can go to the Bahamut's Isles, you've already, at the very least, defeated Marsh Cave, Astos, Earth Cave, Ice Cave, and Ordeals. And arguably, you normally have finished Volcano if you're not sequence breaking a tiny little bit. It doesn't really matter. Volcano's not that hard. But you generally assume everything up to Ordeals, the south continent, the south half of the map plus Ordeals, just to get promoted. That only leaves Waterfall, Water Shrine, Mirage, and Sky, and then the final dungeon. There's only like 4-ish dungeons that are after promotion, and the Waterfall is barely a dungeon, so, you know, there's not a lot of time to play around with your promotion abilities, and by that point in the game, you've already done the hardest part. Plus, you have access to, like, Protect Rings, so death no longer kills you, like death spells. You probably are picking up your ribbons very quickly at this point, whether you get promoted or not, which gives you immunity to everything. So the promotion abilities are very much a lower scoring in terms of their potential. Sure, their final absolute maximum power level does depend on their promotion skills, but most of the game, the hard part, where we're really ranking them, is just their baseline abilities. Now, if you're playing New Game Plus, you start promoted. It's different. That's why it's so different. Anyway, let's just... I'm not going to go about names, but we'll pick the first 4 here, and I'll just spend a little bit of time as we tier list them. So, Fighter, the main thing, the baseline A tier, maybe even S tier, depending on how you want to think about it. In NES, they were the best by far. The main advantages they have, they could equip any weapon except the katana, any armor. period. All the best weapons and armor. They had amazing HP growth, perfect strength growth. The other stats didn't work. So they had all the stats that mattered, plus 3% hit growth per level and 3 magic defense per level. And that is important. Very, very few classes get more than 2 magic defense per level. Even though it's hidden in the NES version, it makes a huge difference. The fighter / warrior here, absolutely one of the best at resisting on-hit spells. And the 3% hit growth makes a big difference too. Plus all the best weapons. In terms of Renaissance, they get Warcry, which is a usable skill. It's a little anti-synergistic in that your fighter is often the person who should be attacking, and he's giving up a turn to boost and buff his friends. But it is very synergistic with like other melee physicals. The Dark Knight loves it. The Dragoon loves it. The Archer, maybe. The Black Belt, yes. Anyone that swings with a physical attack loves this ability. But the fighter, could just attack, and that might be just as good. And if you don't have a party that has other melee people, then it's wasted. But that's okay. He's good on his own. Shout doesn't do anything. Don't worry about it. And that's it. So very simple. Nothing really to talk about there, right? Fighter is very simple. And I'm just going to pull up the tier lister here. You shouldn't really need me to talk much about it. He's A tier, possibly the top of A tier. He certainly was the best character in the NES version. Whether that holds up now or not, we'll see. But at the very least, we're putting him as the baseline. He is real good and is no weaker in Renaissance than he was before. He doesn't get a lot new. I will say, to a small downgrade, his promotion is a little bit lackluster in Renaissance. His personal quest sucks. He gives up the Excalibur for a shield. He gets a limit that makes him take 0 damage. He can cover for people, but it's a little bit like I'm not gonna be grading him on Paladin stats too harshly because he's already amazing. But I actually think his Paladin promotion is a bit of a letdown. He starts amazing and he doesn't get much better. He just gets all the best weapons armor. He probably should just be attacking anyway. If I was grading based more on New Game Plus, I would run this a little differently. But that might be a different tier list. Okay, that's everything to talk about Fighter. We got to keep moving here, or I'll never get through all 18. Next up, Thief. Oh, the Thief. In the vanilla, he was the worst. Absolutely, there was no doubt about it. Magic defense 2 per level, hit percent 2 per level. Could not equip hardly any armor, hardly any weapons. His strength growth is relatively bad. His agility and luck were solid, but most of the stuff he was good at in the original game kind of was glitched. Running chance and strike first, I think. Can't remember how accurately the math worked out, but it wasn't reliable. In Renaissance, the Thief is quite good, specifically, in the top slot here when he's running around on the map, because it means you get ambushed less, and in my experience, he actually makes certain areas like Ice Cave with the terrible encounters not as bad as they normally are. So having a character with really good luck and agility, especially in the top slot where you're affecting encounter, not chance of encounters, you still get the same number of fights, but when you roll a formation, the chance of getting your first strike or not ambushed is definitely seems to be improved by having a Thief. Plus he runs away, which is good for getting us out of those undead that stun everybody. So I have to give him some extra points in Renaissance due to those changes. However, most of his other abilities are relatively forgettable. You can steal some money from enemies, more than normal. So like an ogre has 195 gold, you could eventually steal another 195 from each ogre you fight, basically doubling the potential value. Given he doesn't do very much damage, this is a fine, backup skill to use in combat in a normal party. Seeing as 20% less than 1 is still 1, and then you get some money out of it. Okay, that'll speed up the grinding for gold a little bit. It's not bad. He does have a very interesting search function, and it's a little contentious because it depends on the party, and you have to know in advance. He will get you extra weapons for some classes. Notably, the Dancer has a special knife, the Dark Knight has a special greatsword, the Red Mage has special armor, like a red shirt to go along with a white and black shirt. There's probably a couple others I'm not remembering. Plus he gets an extra ribbon. You can get 4 ribbons at the very end of the game, as well as an extra bracelet, like better than Opal bracelet. So there are a few times, and including some status protection helmets early on, there's a few things that this gives you that are really good. But it kind of depends on your party composition, and in a normal random run where you don't know, it actually makes the game worse, unless you're following a guide. If you are trying to find all these hidden items in dungeons, you will 100% take a whole bunch of extra encounters and risk running out of resources or dying just trying to find them all. And mostly they're not worth it. There's only like a handful, like maybe 5 to 10 that I think are even worth picking up, really. So unless you're following a guide, search is questionable, let's just say, in terms of your party strength. There are some good things out there. Getting them is a hassle, and I'm not sure it's worth it without a guide, is the way the first time I played through, I did it myself manually, and I was getting really frustrated with, you found 5 gold, you found a potion. That said, now that I know what they all are, there's some good ones, but it's a hassle. Also, you move faster, that doesn't really change very much, but, you know, that's nice. So where does that put Thief? Obviously, he promotes into Ninja late game and catches up with the fighter a fair bit, getting some spells and being able to equip more weapons and armor. Still not quite fighter tier, but his 2% hit growth and 2 magic defense always keep him behind the fighter, even after promotion. The Ninja can also do some cool Ninja scrolls. I'd say the promotion to Ninja is considerably better than the promotion to Paladin, at least. So that's something. But I'm gonna have to still rank him fairly low, but I don't think he's the worst anymore. So I think Thief, I'm kind of thinking C tier right now. Would I advise you to take him? Not really. He's still almost always a liability in the first half in terms of combat power. His ability to dodge and run from some tough encounters push him up a little bit, and some of those search items help him out. But like I said, it's almost like a double-edged sword. Getting those search items might actually make you might lose your attempt. If you're not over-leveled or you don't know what you're doing, you might literally just get an extra counter and get some stun touch undead that just kill your group. So I can't really rank him too much higher than a C, but hey, he has moved up in the world, and the Ninja is quite effective. You just don't get it till the point where it doesn't really matter. That's, like I said, the problem with the promotions. They're not valued very highly in my ranking because it doesn't matter. I will say a solo Thief was not as bad as I was expecting. I definitely got through Ice Cave a lot easier this time around than in the NES. Or with other, sorry. The Thief did a better job in some of those bad encounter dungeons compared to other classes. Black Belt. Well, the Black Belt's probably the most boring. You do sometimes equip some nunchucks early on, but mostly they just punch things. And they tend to get the maximum HP, the highest vitality. Their growth formula is very simple. They get 2% hit rate per level. They actually get 4 magic defense, the absolute best magic defense growth, which is good, because otherwise they're a bit weak in terms of defense. They get 1 absorb per level, 2 damage per level, and they hit twice as often, so the 2 hits at 2 damage, and 1% crit per level. So early on, their physical damage sucks. Once they hit like level 10 or 11, they start doing okay, probably not as good as a fighter. Once they get to like 20s, then they start being about equivalent to like a flame sword fighter. Once they get into 30s, they probably start doing about the same as an Excalibur wielding fighter. And then once you're in the 40s and higher, they do way more damage. But it does take at least into 20s or 30s before they really contribute as much as someone else. Like, I'm just saying fighter, but there's other martial jobs that are that baseline. So he has to be worse than a fighter. His survivability is considerably worse, much less armor, much less he can't take advantage of elemental protections and status protections, although he gets good magic defense, which helps as you get to high levels. He does start very low, though. I think he might have the lowest starting magic defense, so although he gets 4 per level, it takes a little while to catch up and eventually surpass everybody. So that's kind of the catch with the monk. The classic one is at level 50, he does the highest damage of anyone, especially if hasted, and one-shots chaos. That's still true in Renaissance. Nothing's changed there. But how much you want to grind, well, honestly, needing that much grinding is a downside. He is better than the Thief in the early game, but not by much until level 10 or higher, basically. In terms of Renaissance skills, he's got his new key system. It's okay, but you have to spend a turn to charge it. and then you can hit multiple targets if you do tons of damage. Unfortunately, this mostly only matters at the point, like I was talking about, when you're at like level 30 plus, and then you can do a bunch of hits and kill things. It's kind of so little damage that it doesn't really help you that much. Plus, you need a turn to charge it up before you use it. So by the time you actually pull this off, a good team has already killed most of the enemies. He can also do a little bit of healing. It's not a huge amount, but, you know, it's something to do, especially at those first 10 levels. Like, this gives him some utility, but I consider it pretty weak. Once he's promoted, they get a little better. You start with 1, and you have a max of 3, and you get an AoE. But again, it's a little bit too little too late. For the most part, spending a turn to boost and then do the big, you know, Aura Bolt style AoE attack. It's kind of like 2 turns to do the same amount of damage as like a Black Wizard would have just done already. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it's a little bit too little too late. If you started with it, maybe. But in the end game, by that point, you want to just be deleting an enemy every turn, basically. He also gets... I don't remember all the promotion skills off the top of my head. He also gets the ability to counter, but it's pretty rare, like 1 in 4, 1 in 8, and then he takes no damage and counters for a tiny amount of damage. It gives him a little bit more survivability, but overall it doesn't really affect much. So the changes in Renaissance help him out a little bit, but not much. And in the end, it kind of still comes down to how much grinding you want to do. For now, I might say he's just sort of average. Obviously better than the Thief, worse than the Fighter. And if we're going to stick with these 5 tiers, 8, like S, well, maybe we can name them as we get closer to the end of the tier list. But I think this is an easy start. Fighter at the top, Black Belt in the middle, Thief at the bottom. And saving a slot for absolute trash at the bottom, which the Thief isn't in. Keep in mind, we're not in the bottom tier here. Anyway, we got to keep moving. We're 20 minutes in, I've only done 3. And these are the easy ones. Next up, Red Mage. So, Red Mages are pretty darn good. They can equip a good amount of early game weapons, basically like the Fighter, although they don't get the promotion Fighter items, like the Defense Sword. Although they can equip the Sun Sword promoted, so they do have something similar. But they don't quite go up to Excalibur tier. But their swords are actually, like, almost competitive with the Fighter. Their armor is less so. They can wear chainmail early on, but that's the best they're going to get. And then they're just into mage bracelets, basically. With no shields or... I guess they can wear the buckler, but no real shields. No helmets or anything like that. So they have better survivability than a mage, than the majority of mages. And their damage is not too far off of Fighters. I would say, early game, they do more damage than a Thief by a long shot. And more damage than a Black Belt, until the Black Belt, at around level 12, if you have a Silver Sword Red Mage, level 12 Black Belt, I think the Red Mage is still going to beat them for a little bit. But the Black Belt will surpass them probably by level 20 or so. That said, Red Mage has other tricks. So, by the way, 2% hit growth, like the Thief, and 2% magic defense. That's pretty standard for most classes. His stats are a bit lower in growth. He's not going to get as much strength as the Fighter. And now in Renaissance, intelligence does do something. So his intelligence will increase the effectiveness of his spells, both the damage and the hit rate. So like a status affecting spell is better with high intelligence. The Red Mage does not get crazy intelligence like a Black Mage does, though. It's only moderately growth. His spell selection is white and black, and he gets most lower level spells. So he's got a lot of versatility. He is the jack of all trades. He does get access to pretty much all the spells you care about, other than the level 7 and 8 stuff, which is great. In terms of Renaissance, he also gets Saboteur. I don't know exactly how this works, but in practice, his status-afflicting spells, like Hold for Paralyze, Slow, Dark, Sleep, Rub for instant death, Bane for instant death, those things are all pretty accurate with this guy. It's not 100%, and if an enemy resists it, it's still not super likely to work. But this definitely gives him a pretty significant boost. Something like Carry, who is weak to paralysis, or status magic in general, it's almost guaranteed the Red Mage can paralyze, slow, mute, etc. No problem. That's pretty cool. He also, when he promotes, gets a couple unique level 8 spells in Renaissance that are questionable. Some people love them. I'm not a huge fan. And he gets the ability to move spell charges around. Like, he can change his level Like, let's say he's got 5 level 1 slots and 1 level 5 slot. He can swap them, basically. That's a promotion thing. They all get limits. I'm not talking about their promotions very much, to be honest. But point is, mostly Red Mage. How does he do in the early game? I mean, obviously, he's almost as good as the fighter. I don't think there's really any question. Some people might even argue he's better than the fighter, in that he can do most of the things the fighter can do in the early game. Plus, he has access to Fire 2, Lightning 2, the Life spell, after promotion, the Warp spell, and Exit spell. Like, he's definitely... I don't think... In the NES, there's really no doubt that my top 2 are Fighter, Red Mage. Maybe the best party is like Fighter, Fighter, Red Mage, Black Mage, in my mind. Like, optimal NES fight group. Or really just Fighter, Fighter, Red Mage, Red Mage. Depends on how badly you want Nuke and slightly earlier spells. He's just that good. So versatile, fills in a lot of roles. In Renaissance, he's just better. Once you've got access to like Bane and stuff, Kraken and Lich, or Kraken and Tiamat can be one-shot, Carry can be paralyzed. I think you might even be able to mute the Lich if you try hard enough. You can certainly crack it if you've got access to, or Quake it. Actually, I'm not sure Red Mage can learn Quake. Anyway, point is, he is very dominating. I would say not quite as strong as Fighter. He doesn't just delete things, he is a little bit more fragile. His HP tends to be pretty bad. And his armor's not as good by a long shot. So, you know, he's not a huge carry, but I think he was already very good, and probably got a bigger upgrade in Renaissance than the Fighter did. So I'd say he's even closer to Fighter tier at this point. So he's got to be up there just behind the Fighter. Okay, we need a new set of 4. Let's get a new set of 4. In terms of solos, not like it matters that much. Solo Thief sucks. Solo Black Belt's boring. Solo Fighter's easy. Solo Red Mage maybe even easier. Not really much to think about for those. Alright, White Mage up. Black Mage up. And we're going to finally get into some of the new classes here. Okay, White Mage. Well, they're a little bit boring. Basically no weapons, basically no armor. They can use hammers, but there's not really any good hammers for attacking. And then anyone could use the Thor's Hammer to cast Lightning too. That's nothing unique. Their armor is basically 0. So the worst armor, basically the worst weapons. Magic defense only 2 per level, hit percent only 1 per level. So pure mages generally follow that pattern. The White Mage does tend to get pretty high health, usually more than a Thief or a Red Mage in my experience. The Black Belt gets the most, Fighter the second most. I think the White Mage is the 3rd highest HP usually. So that's not bad, you know, not bad. Which is because you want the White Mage to be alive to do all their healing magic. They do get some anti-undead spells. The Harm line does damage to undead. Changed in Renaissance, Fade is Holy Elemental, which does bonus damage to undead, rather than non-elemental. So that's, you know, a little bit better if you're fighting Wiz Vampires and Zombie Dragons in the final dungeon. It's not super effective, given you get it at the end of the game. But the White Mage was always strong in terms of keeping the party alive. I rank them relatively low, because most of the time they're doing nothing. They're not really contributing to the fight. And honestly, more DPS, killing enemies quicker, probably means you spend less time healing. So that's why my optimal party doesn't have a White Mage. Even though access to life spells are really good, you're just not going to die very often if you have a very strong party. And that's kind of the same thing here. If you want a party that can survive longer and kind of stall fights out, yes, White Mage will help. But most of the time, you're probably better off with somebody offensive. It's just the nature of Final Fantasy 1. We do get better healing, so heals always heal their higher end of the range. So instead of 16 to 32, it's 24 to 32 on a cure spell. It does help. It's not like the biggest difference, but it's nice. They get all the white magic spells that are the vanilla white magic spells anyway. And they do get a free AoE heal that's percentage based. So as you get to higher levels, eventually you can heal 30%, well, 1 to 30% of everyone's HP every round for free. And that's a fair amount of free healing. So it's kind of like having a heal staff, slightly better than a heal staff as it charges up. And they just can always do that. So they have some very nice passive healing. But other than that, there's not a lot changed. Their promotion, once their promotion, there's a quest that lets them cast life in battle, which is a nice upgrade. very rare to be able to raise someone from the dead in combat in Final Fantasy 1. The other spells, I can't remember what else they get. Their limit just full heals everyone, stuff like that. They haven't really changed that much. I still think, in terms of party composition, when I was a kid, I would have been like, White Mage is mandatory. You cannot skip them. Nowadays, though, I actually think they're pretty skippable. If you know the game a little bit, if you're playing slightly optimally and not just randomly exploring mazes and getting lost and not knowing what you're doing, White Mage is not very helpful. If you are playing blindly, I would rank them a little higher, I think. But if you kind of know what you're doing, and from my experiences, the people playing Renaissance probably know the base game a fair bit, I'm actually going to put them in C tier above the Thief, because the White Mage has way more utility than a Thief does. But their contribution in the first half of the game isn't much better than a Thief. The harm spell helps on fights that suck. But the harm spell doesn't do as much damage as Fire 2 does, so it's not as good as the Black Mage kill and stuff. And this might be a little controversial, but in my opinion, the White Mage isn't something you need to bring. And it's maybe not even carrying its weight in the party very much, in that by having a White Mage, you're sacrificing 1/4 of your actions to do nothing. A lot of the time. A lot of the time, they're doing nothing. And I would rather have characters that are doing something. There are some buffs they can cast, like Invisible 2, Fog 2, the anti-element spells. Like, they have things that can help, but they're pretty situational. And until you get item casting magic, they don't have a reliable damage. And that's late game. Mage Staff for Fire 2, Thor's Hammer for Lightning 2. Stuff like that is late game. And at that point, I mean, there's other characters that have been doing that for ages. So, sorry, the White Mage lovers, you're in a relatively low tier. But above the Thief, I will say, would I? That's actually kind of a tough question. Renaissance Thief versus Renaissance White Mage. Who provides more? I think the White Mage has to win, but it's kind of close in my mind. They're very much nearly a tie. Let's keep going. One more vanilla class. I might be missing some important notes here, but Black Mage. Black Mage gets boosted drastically by some of the mechanical changes and spell fixes in Renaissance. I mentioned earlier that intelligence buffs up damage and hit rate, which is very good because the Black Mage has perfect intelligence growth. They will have, I believe, always 69 intelligence at level 50 because they always get 1 intelligence per level, I think. Sure, 1% hit growth, 2% magic defense, basically the worst HP in the game, and the same weapons and armor, basically, as the White Mage. White Mage gets hammers, Black Mage gets knives and the cat claw, but it doesn't matter. They're not... If you're attacking with melee on a Black Mage, you've messed up. They get all the black magic spells, tends to be offensive casting and debilitating spells, although they have a couple buffs. Excuse me, my playlist has decided it's time to sing. Temper, which gives you attack up, and Saber, which gives you self-attack up, but doesn't matter for the Black Mage. But the Temper spell was bugged in the vanilla game, and now it works. So having a Black Mage cast fast to double attacks, and then Temper to add extra damage per attack on whoever is attacking, makes a huge difference. It is very, very powerful. In the NES version that didn't work, but in every other remake since then, and plenty of future FF games, that's a standard use if you can't use magic to kill your enemy. I love memorizing enemy weaknesses and taking advantage of weakness to fire, lightning, and ice. That's their bread and butter, Fire 2, Lightning 2, Ice 2, and eventually the level 3 versions. Eventually they get Nuke, but I think basically every spell level they've got a useful spell. They can do a similar thing to the party in that they double intelligence, which is maybe not as good as the 50% damage buff from the fighter, because there's not as many spellcasters that need intelligence, but it does, and it's not like 50% bonus. Like, at really high levels, doubling your intelligence, let's say you had 50 intelligence, that's plus 25% damage on a spell, if I remember correctly. Doubling it gives you another 25% damage, not like additively rather than multiplicatively. So is 25% more damage on someone else's spell worth it? I mean, it's nice, but you're giving up your turn. But it doesn't cost you anything, it's free. And the potency is, I think, hit rate, so it might also help you get a paralyze or an instant death spell off. But you do sacrifice your own, for a turn, you sacrifice your own action. So you, in a full spellcaster party, that can help, but on their own, you know, not too much. This one is very important, though. This is reduced chance of spells being resisted for reduced damage. So, for instance, the Lightning 2 spell has a base power of, you call it 60, so it's 60 to 120 before your intelligence boost. And they can save against it for half, basically. So, enemies with high magic defense will maybe take 30 to 60 on average, whereas low magic defense enemies will take 60 to 120. This means you take the lower range far less often. I'm not sure the exact math, but basically it's like a magic defense piercing kind of ability, and therefore your damage is even more reliable. And if you include the intelligence boost, your Lightning 2 spell that in the vanilla game could do basically 30 to 120, now we're doing 60 to 120 most of the time, and it's actually higher. Even at level 1, we have a 10% bonus to magic damage, I think. I think it's half your intelligence is percent, I think. But something like that. That's not much, but 66 to 132 already sounds good. And as your intelligence gets higher, it just goes up and up. And that also will multiply if you're taking advantage of an elemental weakness. So if you're using Lightning 2 against water enemies that are weak to lightning, instead of, like, let's say 70 to 140 if it's boosted a bit, times 1.5, now we're doing around 100 to 200 damage. And suddenly the range is high enough that you're reliably one-shotting creatures that you wouldn't have reliably one-shot in the past. And the value of just casting one spell on turn 1 to either kill or nearly kill an entire group of enemies, I don't know how to explain it, but that's the gold standard. That is the best we can hope for in Final Fantasy 1. The fighter cannot do that, but the black mage, and sometimes the red mage, are our first two examples of classes that can do it. I actually think, without a doubt, the new black mage has to be in A tier. And I'm gonna say it's behind the red mage, mostly only because survivability is less, and the red mage can do basically the same thing, just less damage, and more status effect focus, less spell slots, but the ability to have weapons and armor make a big difference. I think the black mage might be my lowest A rank that we end up with, but they are very good in Renaissance. You just gotta protect them, and that can be a little tricky. They do die very easily, but they are the iconic glass cannon nuke their way to victory, and they're only better at it in Renaissance. They do get some new promotion skills. I forget what they are exactly. They cast the same element spell over and over again and gets a bit stronger. They've got a charge skill that basically gives them max damage on their next turn. It's a little bit niche in that most of the time you want to kill things on turn 1, like I just talked about. But if you can't, use your skill to set up a spell that kills them all in the second turn for sure. Nothing survives more than 2 rounds against the Black Wizard if you're going to use that combo. Really, nothing, I don't think. I think it also removes enemy resistances. So if they're resistant to lightning, they no longer are, and you still do good damage, max damage at that point, in fact. And I think it also removes their like status and earth poison death resistances too. So you can basically zap or crack or whatever, I guess quake, pretty much anything with that with the promotion skill. Again, it's at the end of the game, it doesn't matter that much, but I think it's strong enough that it's worth mentioning. So there's your black mage. Very good. On to the new jobs. Woo, finally, only over 30 minutes in. It'll be a long video, guys. You know how it is. It's hard to do these tier lists quickly. Okay, the first new class. I'll probably... I spent a lot of time, but I'm going to be comparing these to the original classes. That's why we spent a bit of time on this. The blue mage is... closest representation is the red mage, because they get basically the same equipment and stat growths as a red mage. They have good swords, good armor, although not fighter tier. They get 2% hit growth and 2% magic defense. They've got, actually, I think, perfect intelligence growth, if I remember correctly, or at least very good. So they've got better intelligence than a red mage, better spell slot progressions. They get more spells naturally, and they have decent weapons and armor. We're off to a pretty good start. The downside with the blue mage is you have to learn your spells by getting hit by them. And that's a mechanic that some people may love or hate. You can use skill lure so that if an enemy is using like gaze, like odd eyes, this will force it to target the blue mage. I will mention right up, there's a chance to not learn the spell, even if you're hit by it. I think it's garbage. That shouldn't exist. But whether I like it or not, that is the mechanic, and I dock him a mark for it because that's kind of dumb. Because you have to survive the battle, I think, to learn the spell. And some of them are borderline impossible. Some of the level 8 spells, particularly. I'm thinking of Toxic from the Iron Golem that's literally in the final dungeon, the last floor with encounters. And very rare at that. It's not worth trying to get, honestly. It's not even that powerful. And there are a few other spells that are like that. Fortunately for Blue Mage, there are set encounters in towns and dungeons in the early game. They give you access to a lot of enemy skills early on. So it's not a big problem in the long run, but it is learning the Blue Mage spells is a cost that the Black Mage and the White Mage and the Red Mage do not have. We'll just keep it like that. Other than that, not much else at unpromoted. Their promotion skills are really good. They have an ability that lets them take an AoE spell, double the damage, and make it single target. That is a way of focus firing bosses that a Black Mage can't. So the Blue Mage can, with a little bit of help, do even better damage every second turn, technically. And the real winner for Blue Mage is actually the skill selection, because it's all the vanilla NES enemy skills, and that includes Trance. Trance is non-elemental paralyzing all enemies, and pretty accurate. So what that means is you can paralyze Chaos, or anything, really, literally any enemy in the game. Nothing other than magic defense protects them. And with good intelligence, you pierce through a lot of resistances. So there are some skills that the Blue Mage can learn that are... I mean, it's a little bit of a pain to learn, but they're definitely better than the spells a Black Mage or a Red Mage can learn. And he kind of has different peaks and valleys. I think his level 2 and 3 spells are a little bit worse than in terms of damage than the Black Mage, but then his level 4 and 5 spells do a little bit more damage. So it kind of goes back and forth. There's a lot of fire spells. There's only one lightning spell. You know, it's not exactly equivalent. Sadly, there's no wind elemental or water elemental spells like you might get from modern Blue Mages. There's no big guard for buffs. There's no white wind for healing. We don't get the modern Blue Mage spells, but it's still a pretty good selection. He doesn't get buffing the way a Black Mage can do haste and temper, so lets it down. And I think overall, it's probably worse than the Red Mage and Black Mage. It's hard to say, because I really like the Blue Mage. I did do a solo run of this guy, and he did a great job. It wasn't even that hard. I think, in terms of tiering, I can't just put everybody in A tier, unfortunately. I kind of think he's just going to be maybe my best B tier, or the worst A tier, but I have to split these categories up a little bit. The fact that he can use Red Mage equipment makes me want to keep him with the Red Mage. Oh man, that's hard. The Red Mage is a little bit better with their Sabotage. I don't know. I don't think I can legitimately put him there. Is he worse or better than a Black Mage? Honestly, I changed my mind. The truth is, good armor, good weapons, carry him through the early game. I said the early game is the most important. And he's got all the stuff the Red Mage does, except for some healing spells. And in the late game, sure, he doesn't get nuke exactly. He gets nuclear, which is very similar. Yeah, I think I have to edge that Black Mage out. It's just the versatility is with the weapons, because he can attack. Yeah, okay. Sorry, Black Mage lovers. Blue Mage beats him out, I think. Plus, he's blue. And, it's in the name. Oh, is everyone going to be A tier at this rank? If everyone's A tier, I'll have to split it up at some point. Okay, next up, our Dancer. Now, this is our first, support class. Well, after the White Mage. They do not get very good armor. Basically, Mage tier armor, which is rough. So you don't really want them in the front row. In a solo Dancer run, the early game is pain. However, some of their dances are basically game-breaking. And you get the game-breaking dance in Melmond, I believe, if I remember correctly. It is the Tango... It's the 4th town, right? Yeah, it has to be in Melmond. Level Force dance. The first one drains. The second one is Quick Step. It's okay. The third one is the heal. which is okay. The first 3 are not crazy, but the 4th one is where it gets crazy. And then the 5th one is haste everyone. The 6th one is... I forget, because I didn't use it very much. Is that Sword Dance? Crit rate up or hit attack up, I think? I forget 5 and 6. I might mix them up. But, you know, fast for the whole group is great, and attack up for the whole group is great. Level 7 is random status effects to enemies, and level 8 is the single target nuke. They're basically all decent. There's a mechanic, without getting all into the nitty-gritty, they need to attack enemies to build up bravery, and then spend the bravery to use their dances. The higher the bravery stat, the more boosted those dance magics are. And basically, once you've got the Tango from Melmond, you can, within a couple turns, basically make any enemy do 1 damage with melee and magic. So, it completely breaks everything apart. Now, unpromoted, they're a little bit weak. Their physical damage is low. You know, maybe Thief tier, you know, it's not great. It's not terrible, but it's not great. It's more than a black or white mage, but definitely less than a red or blue mage. And they only really come online with their physical attacks after promotion, because then they can dual wield, which does get them a lot more power from their melee attack. At the end of the game, the Dancer Rhythmicist is actually one of the best classes for sure. But if you're thinking up to Astos, the first difficult chunk, they're not that great. But once you've got the Tango, that helps a tremendous amount through Earth, Volcano, and Ice. And then that, they scale really good. So I'm actually going to say they're kind of like the Black Belt. Pretty much weak early on. But as they get promoted into the second half of the game, they take off like crazy. And they are mostly a support in that you need to protect them, and they want to buff up other people until you get to very high levels, in which case they're a blender. But that doesn't happen until quite late. I think I have to put more people into B tier. I'm going to put them into B tier, but I'm putting them above the Black Belt. Basically, the thing here is the Dancer cannot delete a group on turn 1. Red Mage, Black Mage, Blue Mage can all delete a lot of enemy groups, especially we're talking normal mode, not New Game Plus mode. A lot of the time, you just go first with Black Mage, Blue Mage, Red Mage, Lightning 2, Fire 2, Ice 2, Fire 3, whatever. The enemy group deletes, and you win the battle. That is so useful. The Dancer can never do that. They always need a little bit of charging up, and then after a few turns, they can debuff an enemy group into nothing, and at which point you definitely win. So they're maybe better against bosses, but average random encounters, the usual most difficult part of the game, not their specialty, but definitely a very strong character. If I wasn't reserving S-Class for a specific purpose, I would probably have split these guys up a little differently so that Dancer could be an A tier. But don't take this as a mark against them. They're still very, very good and a lot of fun to play with. But I can't have everybody in A. Sorry. Alright, next batch. Alright, we made it through 8. Now we're into some of the weirder ones. Geomancer's a little tricky to talk about. Lancer's easy to talk about. Trainer, it's a little bit tricky. And then Evoker, oh boy. Okay, so here we go. Next batch. We're making good progress. We're about halfway through. It's gonna be a couple-hour video. That's fine. That's how it is. It's just how it be. Okay, Geomancer, another equivalent to Spellcaster. They are a 0 armor, 0 weapon, 1% hit growth, 2% magic defense. Basically just intelligence. However, they don't learn spells, they just get them, and their spell slots go up. Interestingly, they actually keep count in between trips to the inn to rest, between terrain types. So if I cast all of these spells in the grasslands, and then went into the forest, they would still be 1 out of 1 in the forest, but 0 out of 1 back in the grassland. So on the overworld, they have a lot of spell slots, so they can spam stuff pretty reliably. That's kind of their main mechanic. However, in a dungeon, they generally have fewer resources than a Black Mage, in general. They do have the ability to random summon a spell, which picks from one of the 4 plus 2 secret ones in the terrain you're in, which are generally stronger versions of the one of the 4 that you can select. And sometimes when you use that random spell, the terrain spell here, random one, it restores one of your normal charges. So they have some recharge sustainability, but their total number of spell slots is a bit lower. They also can ignore damaging terrain. That doesn't really matter. And unfortunately, the thing they need, they don't get till they're promoted. They do get elemental bells as you go through the dungeons. Earth, volcano, ice, water, mirage, sky all have an elemental bell, and that buffs up the associated element. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter. If you get the fire bell in the volcano where you can do fire magic, everything's resistant to fire. And then you go to the ice cave where you get the ice bell, but you can't take terrain from one dungeon to the other. So all the way through the first half of the game in normal mode, the Geommancer kind of sucks. Or what are they called to start? Geommancer. I forget what they're promoted called, but whatever. It's hard. This guy's not great of the spellcasters. One of the downsides with him is his spell damage is based on his level. So if you grind really like crazy, like a black belt, in theory, something like Shining Flare will do good fire damage eventually. And it's like, at level 1, we have an AoE fire spell. That's nice. But it does very low damage at level 1. And it takes a long time to scale it up. Or you need those bells to boost it up by like 50% damage or something. I think of all the spellcasters, he might be the worst one. No, not the worst. We'll talk about that in a minute. But of the ones we've discussed so far, he's considerably lower. Because he doesn't have a sweep enemy spell. You don't have reliable healing. It depends on the terrain you're in. It's weird, because there are some spells that are really good. The grass area ones are actually good. Non-elemental paralysis is great. Fire is often very good. Wind, not so much. But healing enemy allies. Like, the grass spells are one of the better selections, honestly. And some areas, there are some really good spells. In the Water Shrine, there's a bubble effect that gives you kind of a shell magic protection buff, which is really nice to bring into the last, like, fighting chaos. Like, enemies that have non-elemental spells, like Nuke and Nuclear, you still have a way of reducing the magic damage if you have a Geomancer that can bring it, but you don't have the ability to bring terrain spells from one area to another until promotion, so it's kind of only the last third of the game, depending on how much time it takes, usually less. The other thing to mention, they get a limit. If you do their side quest, get all the bells, and get their final limit, they have an ability that you can use once per trip to the inn that deletes anything. It will kill Chaos in one hit. So, like, that's pretty cool, but, you know, most people can kill Chaos in one hit if they really try. This guy can do it on turn 1, which might be the fastest. But, well, like a black belt, I guess. But, I don't think I can rate this guy super high. There are a lot of ways, like, I will say ease to use. This is one of the most difficult to use classes we've talked about so far. Remember my ranking, right? This guy, his contribution level is mixed. He can contribute, but it depends on the terrain type, which is limited. So a lot of the times he doesn't contribute. His vulnerability is high because he's got low armor, low HP. His ease of use is actually very low because even if you do have the promoted skill, you have to bring it around and recharge it. Like, you have to go back and get the sample over and over again to recharge it. It does have some very powerful geomancing spells that you can use that are very good, but they're difficult to use. And synergies and anti-synergies, well, I'm not sure he's super synergistic with anybody. The Black Mage bluffing for his intelligence does help his damage a little bit, but you'd be better off just killing stuff with the Black Mage. So his ability to sweep is negligible compared to the other spellcasters, and it's more of a special spell kind of caster. I will give him some credit that his limit for endgame is, you know, incredibly strong, but it doesn't really help you very much if it's only available for the last couple fights, really. So, because if you're playing it somewhat naturally without sequence breaking, you cannot get the Blessed Bell until you're done Sky Fortress killing Tiamat, basically. Same approximate timing as you get Excalibur. So Excalibur is only really relevant for the final dungeon, normally, unless you steal it and run away. The Geomancing Blessed Bell is basically the same. So it's really only against Chaos that you can use it. The Geostorm limit to one-shot. Everybody else, you don't have that ability yet. Yeah, unless you do some dungeon out of ordering. But that, you can do that if you want. I think... Would I rather... Oh boy, this might be bad. Would I rather have a Geomancer or a White Mage? I'm gonna say it's better than a White Mage. His weight, like, the White Mage spends a lot of time just praying or bonking with a hammer, not really contributing to the fight. The Geomancer rarely does nothing, because he can always do a random terrain, and it usually helps, but it's kind of mixed. It's a random effect that could help or not. The Black Belt starts slow, but you just start deleting one enemy per turn fairly early on. By the time you're doing Earth, at least, usually. And the Geomancer is, I don't think, ever reliably deleting an enemy once per turn for free. Like, you have to get a little bit lucky. So I think that's kind of my boundary. A tier is like, you want them to win fights. B tier at least has good utility and can delete one enemy or make an enemy in group trivialized after a couple turns. C tier can't really do that. So the contribution on C tier is a little bit more mixed. At least, and again, the limit break, yes, does delete things, but you can't use that on every battle, right? Like that's a once per dungeon ability. I think I'm okay with them at the top of C for now. We'll see how it goes. Okay. Next, Dragoon. This one's easy. So Dragoon, closest fighter approximation so far, uses most of the heavy armor, not counting shields, unfortunately. Unlike Kayn, he cannot have a spear and a shield. It's weird. But he's got spears instead of swords. They're generally equivalent with the swords, approximately. And he gets 3% hit growth per level, which is good, very good. So he gets lots of hits, he gets lots of strength, and only 2 magic defense. But, the Dragoon standard, he can jump. And this ignores defense and is a guaranteed crit. Although you lose a turn, you definitely do more than double damage. Like, the most annoying enemies, like, say, Astos, some of the really annoying ones, have a lot of absorb, which is just a negative 40 damage. I think it's 40 absorb on Astos. So if you can do, let's say a fighter has like 30 base damage by that point, or something around that. Your range is like 30 to 60 damage per hit. It's minus 40 every hit against Astos. So you're actually doing 1 to 20. Which is okay, you'll kill him eventually, but it's not amazing. This, however, it doubles your damage because it's a crit, and crits also ignore defense, so it's basically the same thing. But like, if you had the same 30 base power, instead of doing like 1 to 20 damage, you're going to come back down and do, I think, double your base, so 60 base damage, so up 60 to 120, and with no absorb penalty. So you're actually averaging like 90 or 100 damage against a high absorb enemy, which is way more than double damage. So you lose a turn to do, I would say, considerably more than double damage a lot of the time. Which is really, really good. Really, really good for just sniping an enemy. It is a little bit random when you jump, when you land, and it costs you a turn. But you don't have to use it. You can just attack. His basic attack is almost as good as the fighter's. So you have that versatility where if you just want to attack somebody, attack them. If it's something with a lot of armor or a lot of health, jump, and then next turn you'll delete them. And it's free. It's just a skill. It doesn't cost you anything. So that's, like, very valuable. He doesn't get anything else at unpromoted. I would say in terms of ranking, he's probably not as good as the fighter. Not as good armor. Slightly weaker weapons, like no Excalibur tier weapon. And he doesn't do great in the top slot. Because usually the person at the top slot, where the Geomancer is now, 50% of enemy attacks go to the top character, and then 25% for the second character, and then 12.5% for the bottom two. If the Dragoon is in the air, he is not protecting the weakling mages in the back. So jump, it's kind of better in the second slot. So if you've got a fighter tanking, and then a Dragoon in the second slot jumping, it works really, really well. And also the fighter can buff the Dragoon, that's one of those synergies, plus temper and haste and all that stuff, of course. The marshals get more synergies because there's more spells that affect them, basically. Spellcasters, it's harder to give them really good synergies in general. We'll talk about Time Mage when we get there. But like the Black Mage's intelligence buff isn't huge, and there's not a lot of like spell damage ups. It's usually a haste or fast for attacking more often, temper or crit up, like the dancer can do that. You know, there's stuff like that that affects dragoons and fighters a lot more than mages. I think this guy is really good. When you promote, he gets an even better jump that hits all targets. Also crit, also ignores armor. It's amazing. But again, fairly late game. But it is, I think, reliably one-shots almost any enemy if you're reasonably well leveled. So although you won't do it on turn 1, it's a turn 2, 0-cost enemy sweep. So maybe not quite as good as a black mage casting nuke. But it's free, which is always free is good. He's got limits that let him do more jumps more often, and he does get a quest that lets him always go first with jumps. So he jumps at the beginning of combat, and then on turn 2 he lands at the beginning of combat. So in the late game, after promotion, you have a reliable start of turn 2 sweeper if you want to super jump at the beginning of combat. So that means there's no randomness. You only have to wait for the first round of enemy attacks, and then he lands and kills everything. So that's very, very valuable. I have a hard time ranking this guy again. Very high rank. Another A tier for sure. How high up? So he's, I would say, below fighter. Although the fighter doesn't have a sweep. Excalibur does more single target damage per turn. Jump. I mean, it's really good. He doesn't have spell utility. I mean, I could put him... I think because I am valuing the early game more than the late game. So the early game characters like Red Mage are going to rank up a little bit higher in my tier list here, I think, is the main thing. I'm not talking about the strongest level 50 character, because most people will never get to level 50. Most people probably beat the game around maybe 25 if you're kind of new. You could beat Chaos if you have a strong party, you could go in at like level 20 and be fine. And honestly, much higher than level 30 is kind of overkill grinding for a good party. So the point at which these late game, like the black belts and the Geomancer power-ups as their level gets higher, it just doesn't really come online for the average group, and they don't do much in the early game. So Dragoon in the early game, probably not as good as having Fire 2 or Lightning 2, but he's better defensively than the Black Mage, and he can definitely destroy Wizards, Astos, the Lich, maybe more effectively than the other spellcasters. His single target critical hit is really good. Maybe I'll leave him here for now. I might have to move Black Mage down to B tier. For now. It's mostly just his, it's mostly because he's quite vulnerable. But I'm trying to keep the sizes somewhat fair. Okay, we're doing it. We're moving on. I'm gonna try not to spend too long talking about these guys unless there's something interesting. Okay, Trainer slash Beastmaster. Now, this guy is a little weird. Let me look up some of his stat growths here. The Trainer gets 2 hit rate. I was kind of hoping he would get 3% hit growth, but he only gets 2. So he's not like a pure melee character like the Fighter or the Dragoon, and only 2 magic defense per level. His general growths are decent, but not... He doesn't have, like, amazing strength growth. In fact, I would say overall his growths are kind of average. His luck is pretty good, and luck does matter, kind of like how I rank the Thief for having good luck for encounters. But yeah, his stats are kind of middling. His equipment is weird. He doesn't exactly wear fighter armor. He doesn't get iron armor, but he gets like almost iron armor a little bit later in dungeons. So if you get the bone armor, that's kind of the same as iron armor. There's scale armor, I think, that's kind of like fire armor, but he doesn't have like the status protection. So weapon and armor-wise, definitely worse than a fighter. He does get a bonus to axes. I guess I should talk about some of his skills. I'll get to control at the end here. He does get all the axes plus 3 whips. and some new custom axes, kind of like how spears are. There's some new spears. You also can get rarer encounters. This is not particularly useful most of the time. It's a small synergy with blue mages and himself, if you're trying to catch them. Anybody else care about rare encounters? Probably not. So, not very important. Usually the rare encounters are stronger, harder fights anyway, so I'm not super excited about them. And then the 10% hit rate for axes is a small bonus, but it's not nothing. In fact, on the downside, because he gets 2 hit growth per level instead of 3 like a proper fighter, you could basically say that this puts him at above hit. If you could get an axe early on, which you cannot, from levels 1 to 11, he would have a better hit rate with those axes than a fighter. And then at level 11, it would be tied. And then after that, the fighter would have a better hit rate than the axe specialist. And the first axe you can get, I believe, is the silver axe or the great axe. You can buy the silver axe if you go to Crescent. You can get a free great axe in Titans after you get the ruby. I'm not sure if there's any other axes you can get before that. And then there's like a frost axe and a lava axe and stuff that are custom added in. So by the time you get an axe, this actually, because of his hit percent growth, like, it helps, but axes have a low hit rate in general compared to swords. Usually like 5% less than a sword at silver tier. Plus you can buy a silver sword in Elfland. You cannot buy a silver axe. It's not great. His axe wielding damage is not amazing because of the 2% hit growth. He's far behind fighter and dragoon for melee damage. At least baseline. So armor, a bit weaker, like better than Black Belt and Dancer and all the spellcasters and thieves, but worse than fighter and dragoon. Probably. Now, the elephant in the room is control. In the early game, if an enemy is susceptible to control, this deletes them. Well, it temporarily deletes them from the fight. It's like dominate person in D&D terms, except it doesn't work on people. So no undead, no humanoids, no mechanical, I believe is the rules. But that's pretty good. If you're fighting, I guess it doesn't work on ogres because they're technically humanoids. If you're fighting sharks, let's say, a good early game XP source, you just use control on the shark, and then you gain control of it, and you basically get double XP because you get the experience from the shark for controlling it, and the normal winning against the shark XP. You can only control one at a time, and it does fight for you. So if you control them successfully, on the next turn, you will be able to use their abilities, attack with them, and the calculation for attacking with them is a little bit janky. You seem to do a lot of damage, so if you can control a target that has good attack, and your own base stats are somewhat decent, your next turn damage might impress you. So that can be cool, but it takes a turn to set up, and it requires control hitting. And really the major value of control is the enemy stops attacking you. It's kind of like they've changed sides. They've been deleted. Now, they can break out of control, and you can fail a control, so it's not guaranteed. The whips give you bonus chance of controlling, which definitely helps, and I'm pretty sure your level makes a big influence. So as you level up with a whip equipped, you will probably control almost all the time, if an enemy is able to be controlled. So is someone who can always remove one enemy on a random encounter good? It's decent. It doesn't work against all targets, and there are a lot of undead that are really annoying, and there are definitely some humanoids. And it also doesn't work on bosses. So against a boss, the Beastmaster actually doesn't do much. They just attack with a whip or an axe, and they can't really do anything else. So I would say pre-promotion, the Beastmaster is pretty weak. The control is good, enough to be certainly better than a thief or a white mage, probably, because it reduces incoming damage a lot by basically removing an enemy immediately. But I would rather just kill them most of the time, because you might control them, and then next turn they break free, and then you kind of waste it, you gotta do it again. And you're not progressing a victory very much, you're just delaying it. kind of like putting an enemy to sleep, which they usually wake up from immediately. So it's good and it's free, and he does get like decent weapons and armor. And once he's promoted, you can actually capture enemies and then bring them into a different fight, kind of like the Geomancer sample. And I basically will give him the same kind of grade where if you can capture the right enemy and bring him into battle in a different fight, you can bring pretty powerful spells and skills from one enemy to a different encounter that are somewhat unique. Well, either a blue mage spell or a black or white mage spell for the most part. Or just a really big, beefy, high HP. Like you could capture like a T-Rex that has like 800 HP and then bring him into battle, and he would hit pretty hard physically. You can also get some pet food late game that buffs their stats for one fight. I find it a hassle in micromanagement. But, you know, basically the control or the capture in promotion is cool, but very much not easy to use. It takes setup and planning, plus your monster can die. It's kind of a pain to heal them. You have to spend a turn to summon them. They don't do anything. And then next turn, it's like you spend one action to call them, and then next round they can start helping. And then you need to spend another action to summon them again, or to capture them again to heal them. So they're just kind of fiddly to use, and I feel like that's the overall feeling I have for Trainer Beastmaster. They're fiddly to use. I think I'll talk about it at the end of the video, but there are some tweaks to this guy that I think he needs to be better. So I'm definitely putting him in one of the lower ranks. I would take him over a Thief. Sorry, Thief, you're still kind of at the bottom of the list for now. I think the White Mage has more utility on average. Especially against bosses. I actually think Harm 2 working against undead groups is way more valuable in the early game than being able to control non-undead. Because non-undead are very rarely the problem. It's good for grinding, he helps you grind faster. But if you're going to be stuck fighting the really bad encounters, he doesn't do very much. If you're fighting a pack of undead, he can't really help you in the early game. He might kill one if you're lucky, but his damage isn't as good as a fighter or pretty much anyone else on the list above him. Am I really putting him down in C? I think I am. And I think his capture abilities are not as good as the Geomancer's sample abilities with the bell and stuff. It's too bad, because I like the idea of the trainer, but I think he needs some upgrades, basically, for me to be... Especially because he can't even capture enemies until promotion. That's the big one. So early game, against bosses, he does basically nothing. Against undead, humans and stuff, he doesn't do very much. And controlling is mostly nice, but not that good. Maybe he's not even as good as the Thief. I'm not sure. I could be argued up or down on that. All right, now we make people mad. Summoner or Evoker. I'm gonna put him on the tier list first, and then we're gonna talk about why. In fact, crap. What am I doing? I don't know how to use this thing. One second. Okay. No, we'll keep the letter ranking. All right. This is where... Oh, I guess the color's too hard to see. I don't know. Just gotta pick a color. Okay. Evoker. It's bad. It's so bad that apparently he's been buffed by the Renaissance developer, and I still think he's trash. Let's talk about why. He might be in contention for the worst class in Renaissance. All right. Switch back here. Okay, first off, standard mage stats. 1% hit growth, 2 magic defense. I think he's got perfect intelligence growth, but actually very bad luck. This is something I hadn't really mentioned. The black mage actually has decent starting luck and some growth. I think the black mage, does he start at 15 luck actually? Let me double check actually. Let me make sure I've got my numbers right here. Yeah, the black mage starts at 10 luck and 10 agility. The evoker is half of that. And that's not good. As it turns out, luck is really important for running away from stuff. And the evoker doesn't even help you with that. In terms of growth rates, let me double check here. The evoker, where are we? Eventually we'll have at least 25 luck at max level. The black mage is about the same. So they average out in growths eventually, but the black mage starts with a little bit better luck, and it does matter. It's not nothing. I'm bringing this up because it is not nothing. The black mage can also use knives, which are a little bit better than staffs. The evoker can equip nothing special. He just uses wooden staff, iron staff, and copper and silver bracelets. And that's basically it for most of the game. So the worst equipment possible, even less than the black mage and white mage. Nothing unique. With some of the worst stats I've seen. And what really gets him is his magic. So that's what we're going to talk about. So he doesn't have any skills. He does get a random summon after promotion that's kind of lame anyway. He's got a limit that lets him recast a summon instantly on a second turn as promotion. But basically he has nothing useful in his skills. All he has is, hey, you have to do these special dungeons and boss fights to get his spells, which is way worse than even the blue mage, because it's actually quite difficult. And that's it. So none of these are buffs. Everything in his skills are actually like downgrades compared to... I'm going to compare him mostly to the black mage, because they have a pretty similar role in most Final Fantasies. So what are we looking at? Basically, every summon, there's only 2 per level, and there's no choice. So one thing to keep in mind, most of the spellcasters, other than blue mage so far, but red, white, and black, there are multiple spells, 4 per level at least, if red mage has even more. And you pick the 3 you want. So you get to kind of plan your characters around what you think will be most helpful, or the party composition. First off, Summoner doesn't get to do that. You have 2 spells per level, you get what you get. Second, those fights can be quite difficult. You can spend a lot of time getting stuck on them if you have a bad party, depending on the group composition. Some parties will slaughter them. They're not super difficult, don't get me wrong. But if you have a relatively weak party to start with, those summon fights can be actually very difficult, and you'll have to try a couple times. So it's like extra content, some bonus bosses, bonus dungeons. That's cool. It's cool, it's fun. It's more content, you know, +1 for content. But in terms of should you bring this guy? Well, it's harder. It's not like, to me, his summons need to be better because they're harder to get than just buying them at a store. And there's not as many of them, there's not choice. Okay, but that's not the big problem. That's just my intro. I expect his spells to be better to make it worth it. Do I have a... Hold on. I would love to have a summoner that's... Yeah. I'm just going to pick this guy. Don't mind his promotion skills. I can show you them here. Random summon, resummon, nothing else. He doesn't really get anything special. And even at the end of the game, he can't equip anything special. Still has a regular staff. So, all that is covered. But I want to talk about the summons. And this is what the problem is. His best summon is this one. Non-elemental confusion. Now, some people are going to be like, that's crazy. That works on everything. Confusion doesn't last very long. Enemies tend to break out of it in 1 or 2 turns. I think it's a 25% chance to break free. Maybe even 50% chance. Actually, I think it's closer to 50%. I don't know the actual math. This does hit most things pretty reliably, unless they have like 200 magic defense. You cannot confuse chaos, if I remember correctly, though. Some enemies do have a specific prevention. Yeah, chaos is innately resistant to confusion. So, it's not as good as trance for multiple reasons. But, effectively, that's his best spell. Goblin does do potentially good damage. It's random, up to your HP level. So we could do, at level 46, 500 damage with one level 1 spell. But you could still do 40. So it's very hard to rely on that. You've got a regeneration spell, that's okay. It's not crazy, but it's okay. You've got a damage protection spell that does work against both physical and magical damage, but the scaling's really bad. This doesn't work very well. you know, if a nuke does 400 damage to you, this only prevents like 100 of it, maybe at best, right? That's not that much. I mean, it helps, but it's not that much. Kate Sith is better. Unicorn is a small heal and remove statuses, which is okay. And then Carbuncle's Reflect, which sucks, unfortunately, in the way the turn order works. You can't rely on Carbuncle. It's bad. I mean, it is so niche that I can barely give it credit. It is more likely to mess you up than to hit the enemy with a Reflected, but you can theoretically set up a situation where an enemy casts a spell and reflects it. But it only works on spells, not skills. So Warmech uses Nuclear, Reflect doesn't care. But Chaos casts the nuke spell, this will reflect it. But, you know, you have to know a lot about the game to get value out of that. You have to basically know the enemy spell list and what they're going to do next for this to have any value. But, you know, situational, weak. Fenrir is the other really good one. It gives you, like, blink effect. It's not as good as stacking Ruse or Invis, but it is an instantaneous, everyone can dodge 2 physicals. So against, like, Kraken or something, this is pretty good. But those are the only good ones. And although Kate Sith is strong, and a little bit of healing or damage prevention, sorta, and basically damage prevention, confuse, and that's all he's got. Compared to all the others, even support casters, this is pretty weak. The Dancer's support abilities are better. The Bard's support abilities are better. I would say the White Mage and the Green Mage, we haven't got to yet, their general selection of support spells are still better. Although it is questionable sometimes. But Kate Sith is, you get a nice little power bump at this level. You get this in Matoya's Cave pretty early on. This is pretty good early game, and I am trying to value early game spells. This helps you a lot in the early game. And it works on Undead, so this does help. But you know what else works on Undead? Casting Fire 2. Or Harm 2. And then they're just gone. They don't break out of confusion and stun you anyway. So it's honestly worse than most good sweepers. Now let's talk about those sweepers. Charge time. End of story. It's bad. In theory, these spells, Ramu, Titan, Ifrit, Shiva, Leviathan, all do approximately double damage a normal Black Wizard spell of the same level. Lightning 2 is base 60, Ramu's 120. Ice 2 is, yeah, base 80, doubled again. Fire 3 is base 100. These are doubled. Lightning 3 would be 120, I believe, and Ice 3 would be 140 or 70 in the old terms, I think. Is it 70? I forget the exact number, but suffice to say, generally speaking, they are double the damage of the Black Mage equivalent spell. Ish. Bahamut breaks it and does tremendous damage. Nuke is base 200, so this is triple. So double to triple for this one. The problem is, for the first turn, you do nothing. And if an enemy puts you to sleep, or paralyzes you, or kills you, you lose it. You don't do it. It doesn't happen. And if you have a decent team, your other characters are killing things on turn 1. And you want to prevent enemy actions. This is all about action economy. Basically, in practice, unless your group is like Bard, White Mage, Green Mage, Summoner, like just all support, basically, by the time your charge summons tick off, most of the enemies are dead, or you've run away or something. They don't do anything. And then in terms of DPS against a boss, they're just about the same as a Black Mage, except that you have to wait a turn to do your double damage. It's not... Also add in the early game, we have access to lightning but not fire. Fire is the element you want for Marsh Cave and most of Earth Cave. You do not get it. You can get Titan right before you fight Lich, and it does a little bit more damage, but guess what? Everything in Earth basically resists Earth. Surprise, surprise. Nothing in the game, as far as I can see, is actually weak to Earth. So you're never getting that value of Ice 2 doing double or plus 50% damage. Ifrit and Shiva, Volcano and Ice Cave, these are also very hard dungeons with very hard fights to get these. You might not even be able to pick these up on your first trip through Volcano and Ice. So you're basically getting these around when you get the airship, at which point, I mean, you've got other solutions for sure. We're talking promotion class stuff here at this point. Unfortunately, Fairy is wind, and it's a very small heal. Leviathan, very, very few enemies are weak to water, so you're getting this at the same floor as Kraken. It's kind of too little too late. Phoenix is potentially able, as long as you've got spell slots, to keep the party alive, because it casts re-raise when you activate it, and then when you cast it, it actually heals everyone and revives them if they're dead somehow. So if you can keep spamming this, you can kind of keep the party alive as long as you can cast it. Unless the enemy gets a turn before you start casting it. I don't think it has priority to go first in combat. Although in practice it seems to. I've used it a fair bit, and it does seemingly go first most of the time, but I don't know if it's always or just I got lucky in my practice rounds. And then sure, Bahamut, if you get a couple turns to charge it up, does tremendous damage. I don't want to go on about it too much more. I've talked about it in the Let's Plays a fair bit. Fight me, bro. The summon mechanic is... The charge mechanic is trash. And the small caveat of getting Enchant Stone and Anti-Lightning for 2 turns is basically worthless. Getting the timing down... Like, let's say you're fighting something that has Lightning 3, or a Blue Dragon, Thunder Breath. Easy enough. You can use Titan to be like, okay, that will prevent Thunder from doing a lot of damage. Don't worry. First off, Blue Dragon flies, I think, so it takes 0 damage from Titan once it triggers. That sucks. Enchant Stone is giving you the Earth Elemental on your weapons, which doesn't help against the Blue Dragon. Doesn't do anything, as far as I know. And then Anti-Lightning only matters if the Blue Dragon uses Thunder on the turns where this is in effect. If the Blue Dragon goes first, then you start summoning Titan. It doesn't matter, you take full damage from Thunder. And then after 2 turns, you do your Titan spell, which probably doesn't do very much damage, if any. And then if the Blue Dragon does the Thunder Breath after that, once again, you take the damage. That's like the kind of situation where it theoretically might help. Most of the time, it's not even that, like, it does literally nothing. And we also tested that the A spells protect the enemy as well. So, I think we found it on Ramuh, where I had a Geommancer that happened to have a water spell. I cast Ramuh, which gave my party, I thought, protection from water. And then the water spell from Geomancy actually did half damage for sure to the enemies because Ramuh was being summoned. Now, that might be a bug, but that kind of proves how bad these abilities are if it's a bug that has persisted that no one has noticed, because it's so bad. No, like, it's just, it's... Oof, I'm mad. I'm not saying there's no utility here. Kate Sith is good, Bahamut does a ton of damage, but I'd rather just nuke twice. Basically, the value is you spend 1 spell slot, in theory, for a double damage spell after wasting a turn. That value isn't good enough for me. In fact, it is so bad that we're talking about, like, in the tier list, right? Let's bring this back up. The things I value are killing things, ending the fight, disabling things quickly. This will never happen with an evoker or a summoner. And in the early game, they barely contribute. Like, Kate Sith is about as good as they get, or they goblin punch 1 target at a time. For spell slots, rather than just punching or swinging a sword. Anyway, I don't think I want to ramble anymore. I'm pretty sure Evoker is the worst class in the game. And needs the most of a rework. Alright. I think I spent definitely more time there than I needed, but I wanted to make sure you guys got my point. Next 4. We made it to Evoker. Now we're into some fun stuff. Alright, Time Mage. Can you guys guess where the Time Mage goes? Bard. Yeah. Okay, 6 left. We're doing good. So Time Mage, you know, I'll do the same thing I did to the Evoker, where I just put him on the chart and then I explain why he's there. Because this one, there's no negotiation. Time Mage is in a class of his own. And it's... might as well just call it God tier. You can't really compare him against the other classes. He is so far above them all. Maybe I should just add a rank in between, honestly. Like, I'm not even joking. You're basically playing a different game if you bring a Time Mage. So, jokes aside, I'm not kidding. His combat potential doesn't count because he breaks the game. I won't spend too much time hashing it out. We talked about it during his solo Time Wizard run, but just to give you a quick overview on how he breaks the game. You can restart battles, no big deal. I didn't even recognize this the first time I played through or the second time. He also has the best resistance passive. I thought it only worked against time elemental spells like Zap and Stop. But it does say, as well as the effects of slow sleep and paralysis. So all those undead that can stun touch you and ruin your life, or mummies that put you to sleep, stuff like that, he's just immune to all that. So he can't even get stunned. Just add that to the pile of Time Mage shenanigans. I guess, once again, I have to talk about the new spells a little bit for this to make sense, so I'm going to end up resetting anyway. It's kind of hard to talk about him without looking at his spells. And his promotion skills, I honestly don't even think double cast matters. This is maybe one of his worst abilities. I know some people think this is good. I don't think it matters because we're not fighting anything. His limit is cool. You get 3 actions instantly, which, again, doesn't really matter because you're not fighting anything. This is what really breaks the game. One of the big breaks is telepoint. This is a promotion and then quest. But basically, you can set a telepoint in a dungeon and then exit back to town, go to the inn, and then return exactly to where you left off. That basically means you're always at full strength for every fight. You can add into that the float spell, which lets you ignore all encounters, including the encounter trap tiles, where you fight like the wizards or Algamas, or even the fiend refights in the final dungeon. So you basically ignore everything except a few bosses, and you just recast that and then go back to town, and you skip the entire dungeon basically. So once you've got this set up, Time Mage means there is no game anymore. You're just floating around until you fight Chaos. You can do the entire final dungeon and fight nothing except Chaos. You just run straight there. Pick up any treasure you want, get the massa, whatever, it doesn't matter. And just save right before Chaos at full strength. And if you die, you just teleport right there and try again. You can also use this while dead. So you can cast this spell if you have no spells charges at level 6, or if you're dead. So there's no worry about soft locks. You just get out. And that's the main thing that breaks the game. So float, teleport, spawn, teleport point. That's what really breaks the game entirely. You can also do some sequence breaking by floating over rivers and stuff. But other than that, like, sure, he's got super fast. That gets you triple the number of attacks. That's crazy good. What else is notable to mention here? He does have a good sweeper. So Burst 2 is equivalent to Fire 2. You just don't get elemental weaknesses to it. Time Elemental Confusion is pretty reliable to single target. A lot of other stuff is kind of mediocre. I'm not too excited about most of these things. Demi on New Game Plus has a little bit more value, but honestly this doesn't really matter very much. I've never really seen Doom work, but in theory you could Doom Chaos. You can restore spell slots to other characters. I've never really found a reason to use that either, because you're at full... You can just go to inn anytime you want, right? So what's the point? Meteor does decent damage, but it doesn't really matter. Quick is cool. I will mention... shout out to Quick. I think I've shown this off before, but I will... Talking about synergies, one of the reasons the Time God is so powerful is he makes every other class also finally useful. So remember how I'm like, man, that summon ability is really bad on Summoner, right? Having to spend 2 turns to summon Bahamut, that's bad, right? Well, Quick goes first always, and this means we no longer have a charge turn. So, yeah, that's pretty good. So, yeah. Basically, if you have the Time Mage, anybody is good, and you're basically playing a different game. So, how do you rank him? Well, he's in a league of his own. I believe you guys I don't need to explain it more than that, hopefully. That is the Time Mage. Done. Next set. Bard. Okay, we got 5 left. Okay, so Green Mage. So the comparison here obviously is White Mage. They are very similar equipment. 1 hit percent. I think Time Mage was 1 hit percent too. It just doesn't matter. The Time Mage just needs a couple friends that do damage and you won. But yeah, Green Mage is a mage, so bad, like White Mage style, bad armor, basically no armor. Similar weapons to the evoker, I guess. In fact, the equipment is probably exactly the same as the evoker. They can't use hammers or knives or anything cool, I don't think. What they do have is a lot of vitality, which means they have even more HP than a White Mage, which was already pretty high. Yeah, I'm not going to be too nice on the Green Mage. So, they get natural resist poison. They get druid white spells, a different set of white spells. And this one might as well be 100% if it's like you do a tiny little bit of healing, chip healing, when you use a spell on someone else. I don't know why it's 50%. It should just be 100% of the time, honestly, but whatever. Yeah, so Green Mage. How do I talk about Green Mage? I do have a solo Green Mage in progress that I'm doing on my own. I'm not recording this, if you're wondering. This just has a few of the spells, so I can talk about sort of how they play. So they have Ruse, which is, if you're going to do a solo run, this is what makes solo run possible. They get all the anti-spells, including some new ones like Water and Wind, which are basically useless. Anti-Stone is new. They've also got Anti-Poison. This is new, but doesn't really matter much. I mean, there's a couple enemies that can do poison, like the Green Dragon, and that might be it. Stone would stop the Jameera's Stone Breath from killing you, maybe. The Glance from a couple things, like Medusa's. Not really anything silences you. There's basically no water or wind spells unless you're doing summoner bonuses. But Shell 2 is pretty good at this point at half magic damage. It's similar to that bubble effect on the Geomancer. The problem is like they have no offense really at all, and their healing is really bad early game because it's all regen. They don't have like a Cure 4 insta heal. At high levels they get a bubble spell that increases your HP by 50%, your max HP by 50%, and heals you that much. So it's like a half your HP heal kind of thing, but it's not as good as Cure 4 in my opinion. Once they're promoted, they can put a save slot down in a dungeon where you can use an inn and then save the game, which is almost as good as how the Time Mage can leave. Well, almost as good. The point is you can save before a boss fight and save on every floor. So, but that's only promotion. And you still have to get through like Earth and Ice to get it. Basically, you have to get promoted. So the value is a little bit lower in that it's a late game promotion. I think if they had that from the beginning, that would help them a lot, actually. The elephant in the room for the Green Mage is actually Exuviation. And I have tested this a lot, and I knew my first impression was it was garbage. My much more thoroughly tested opinion is it's actually definitely garbage. It is, I believe, with a small margin of error, a base 25 damage non-elemental per buff expended. So you have to spend a turn to cast Anti-Fire, for instance. And then you target an ally, remove Anti-Fire, and then you hit all enemies for non-elemental 25 damage, which is 25 to 50 unless they save, in which case it's like 13 to 25, I think. I also think this ignores your intelligence buff. I'm pretty sure I've tested this enough. You do not get your bonus damage from intelligence, which means intelligence does nothing on the Green Mage. They literally have no spell that I can find that intelligence does anything. At least for a White Mage, intelligence helps them out with harm spells and fade. For a Green Mage, I think it literally does nothing, and it's their best stat. So that's brutal. But Exuviation, I believe it's a 25 to 50 against magic resistant enemies. It's likely to be like 13 to 25 with one spell. If you can go anti-fire, anti-ice, anti-lightning, it stacks it up, I believe, linearly, +1 each. And there's a lot of buffs you can put on. So we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 buffs. And that, in theory, puts it at 200 damage, which is about a nuke. But in practice, when I have tested it, it does not have anywhere close to the accuracy as a nuke spell. So although a nuke spell might have the same raw damage, 100 to 400 range, approximately. I think that's how the math works, or at least it's close to how it works for Exuviation. I'm not like 100% sure, but it's somewhere around there. But enemies save for half damage way more often. Even though it's non-elemental, they actually take the low roll. And think of how many turns and spell slots that takes. 1 turn, 2, that's 8 spell slots and 8 actions to set up, and plus the 9th to actually activate it. Now, if you have a normal party of 4, you could do it 4 turns in a row after you set it up, because it's just single target, removes everything from one person, and then cast Exuviate for damage. The thing is, it's just way too slow a charge. It's probably actually worse damage than a summoner. And I already thought the summoner was terrible. So Exuviation, oddly enough, in a solo run is passable. But in any normal 4-person group, which is what I'm trying to grade these on, you might as well forget it exists. It's so bad, skip it. So what does that leave the green mage? Well, anti-spells that mostly never matter. Healing that's pretty slow, especially in the early game because it's percentage based. In the late game, these are very efficient healing. But, you know, killing things is efficient too. We just can't do that. Access to Shell 2, and there's some pretty good high-level late-game spells that are not here. Level 6, they get Invis 2 and Fog 2, as well as the White Mage. Notably, they do not get Exit. You have no teleportation magic on a Green Mage. And then level 7 and 8, there's a couple of nice spells up there as well. But the story is basically, I think, given that their main competition is the White Mage, they are worse than the White Mage, I think, in every way. And I think I'm actually putting them down in D tier, below the Thief. They do not contribute to random encounters at all. They can't kill things, they can't status things. The amount of turns and spell charges it takes to get an Exuviation off is tiny. And although, yes, once promoted, they can save anywhere, which kind of trivializes the game in a way. They're just soft saves. You can't soft lock yourself like it's if you hard reset, effectively go back to the main menu and reload. The in dungeon saves are not going to overwrite your save at a town, but that's post promotion, and at that point, warp, exit, you know, the time magic stuff is all online, and all the other super powered abilities are available. So yes, I'll give them some credit that you can save right before you fight chaos. That's pretty cool. But they barely help getting you to chaos. And they can't even heal from the menu, so they can only regen stall in battle, which means you need enemies that are like not doing too much damage, or you're spending more turns using like the white shirt to get invis on everybody or something. It works, it's just a hassle. Easy to use? No. I think the Green Mage is, so far, the second worst class that we've talked about. Let's keep going. And they don't really have any redeem, like they have no special weapons or armor either. Like that's, maybe some of these classes could be fixed with some custom gear. Okay, the final 4. I don't think I have any examples ready for these guys. Alright, we're almost through. We're almost through. The Bard. Now, you guys might remember the solo Bard challenge. That's not indicative of how useful a Bard is. Obviously, they're a support character. Their weapons are mostly forgettable. Unless you work really, really hard, the damage output of a Bard harp might as well be nothing. If you're not familiar... oh, I forgot to... Bam. Try to make sure I've got the right screen open for you guys. Bard harps do very low damage and hit all enemies, they never miss, and ignore enemy defense. Unfortunately, the bards are immune to spells like Temper and the Power Glove increasing their strength, so you can't even buff them up to do good damage, really. Although I think Fast and Haste, like the doubling effect works. But for the most part, in a normal party, they're never going to deal real damage. So what you're going to be using them for is support. They can hide, and they've got all this song stuff. So, Bard songs, approximately 1 per town. That's how sonic damage works, I mentioned that already. They resist silence, which means nothing, because nothing silences you. And they're spoony, which is, I think, a technically debuff of some sort. I have a feeling this just means they're bad. Like, you know, they fail more often or something. I don't know. My experience is they're just not very good. Now, the Bard songs, oh, once again, I kind of need to show those off to talk about them. Do I have a Bard? No. Dang it. Sorry, not super prepared. I mean, I'm relatively prepared for this, but... Okay, let's talk about Bards, because their abilities, their utility is almost entirely dependent on their songs. And I don't remember them as well as the Dancer. The Dancer songs I remember pretty well because I think I like the Dancer a lot more. The Bard is going to be below the Dancer for sure. I'm just loading up my guide in the Discord for Renaissance. There are how-to guides. There's a channel in the Discord. And Sir Astral or something like that. Sir System Error, different guy. Not Sir Astral from Shining Force. He has, or she has, provided a lot of information, such as all the spells in the game, including Bard songs. So, even though I don't have a save state ready for this, in just a second, all spells, and I can share this with you guys. Okay. This is system errors, blah, 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 all that stuff. So this has a lot of information. I use this as reference a fair bit when I don't want to try to look it up myself in-game. Bard, Geommancer, Bard songs. Okay, here we go. So, they're, like I said, approximately 1 per town, although you have to talk to a lot of people. It's a little bit of a hassle to learn them all. Protection, it's a small buff to absorb. I don't think it's amazing. This is early game, a small value, but if you're just removing one of your 4 characters to give everyone a little bit more absorb, that's not great. They also don't stack. I don't know if I mentioned it, but basically, until promotion, you can only have you can have 4 songs active if you only play music and hide. But you have to hide to recharge your Bard, so until you're promoted, you can cast one song, you can start one song, and then hide, the song keeps going, and then cast a different song, and now you have 2 active, but then you have to hide, cast a third, hide, cast a fourth. But you can't double up. Once they're promoted, the limit lets you break that a little bit. They're persistent after the limit break. But that's, again, once per dungeon and stuff. So for the most part, I'm not factoring in limit stacking, because that's not how they normally work. Now, in the early game, is a little bit of absorb going to help you? Not much. Is +8 damage going to help you? Yeah. Depends on your party. If you have a lot of physical party members, this helps. It's not a huge buff. It's about equivalent to casting Temper once. So, if you just have one person attacking, like a fighter, the Black Mage casting Temper, a level 2 spell, similar era of Courage, you could just do that. And then Temper is permanent for the rest of the fight. Courage breaks if the Bard is ever put to sleep, paralyzed, killed, or tries to do anything other than sing or hide. So if he attacks or drinks a potion, you will lose your buff. So only useful if you've got lots of people that need damage and no other way to get it. Not great. Regen, 5%. This is like the stall strategy. You can use Angel Song and then hide, and then the Bard is not even available to get hit, and the other 3 people restore 5% of their HP every turn. Forever. very, very situational. I think the odds of this being useful in a good 4-person team is very tiny. So the first 3 songs were not off to a great start. Yes, against a boss fight, you could put all 3 of these up, or even all 4 up once we get to there. And that helps you a little bit, but I think most any other class is better against wizards and Astos. This is still pretty bad in the early game. Hero's Rhyme, I think, is kind of garbage. Increasing luck mostly just means your run chance, and morale means the enemy's run. Not worth a song, I don't think. So then we get to Melman tier stuff. Boost magic damage by 30%. Certainly, if you're making a magic team, this starts feeling good. Your black mage will love you. However, this is after Astos, so we're already getting to like level 5 spells. Plus, you're at the whims of turn order, so if you're trying to fire 3 a group of undead, there's no guarantee the bard goes first, in which case this is kind of wasted. But it's a decent buff, and it does work on a lot of damage, so the exuviation from green mage, I believe I tested, is affected, as is the white mage spells, pretty much any magic damage. That's okay. Magic defense plus 100%. Very situational, once again. This is great if everyone has, let's say, 50 magic defense. Getting over 100 means you cannot be stun touched or death touched or slick touched by enemies that have on-hit effects. So if you can cast this against those encounters, or if you can cast the spell, if you get your action in time, that might save you. You might as well just try to run, though, because the bard's pretty good at running, and then you're just out of the fight. There's a few times where this helps, but it's very niche. Critical chance buffing, it's cool. But, again, now we're getting very late game. This is, I think, Waterfall, Cardia. So you gotta have the airship at least, I think. Critical chance. I mean, sure, if you're stacking up against Chaos for a final boss fight, you can get a pretty good crit rate. Not very helpful against random encounters. And then the final one is double XP, which means basically garbage against bosses. But if you're grinding somehow after literally going to the second last dungeon in the game, sure. So they're not as good as the dancer songs. They can be interrupted. And although the limit lets you stack up to 4 times of the same song, which is pretty good against some bosses, like, it can affect the outcome. But I actually think, not really huge surprise, the bard is usually not contributing very much to the actual team. His regular attack will do a little bit of AoE damage. His songs can't... I think if the songs didn't get interrupted by attacking or getting paralyzed or something, which, I mean, it makes sense they are, but the fact that you can lose those buffs, whereas nobody else has to worry about that, if you cast Invis 2, you just have Evade. If you cast Temper, you just have Attack. The Bard has to deal with interruptions, which sucks, and because he can only really cast one, and then hide, and then cast another, and then hide, for most of the game, you can't really have 4 running at once, unless you're doing a really long fight. So I think he's joining the Green Mage. Now, would I rather have a Green Mage or a Bard? I think I'll take the Bard. I think Thief to Bard, actually, I give the credit to the Thief. The Thief, I also have a... Where is it? I don't want to open the wrong tab here. I have a tab with all the stats, so maybe you're thinking the Bard could just do the Thief thing and be good at running away. Let's see how they look at a quick glance. Thief starts with 15 luck and 10 agility. And the Bard... Where are you, Bard? Minus 5 luck, same agility. And I believe, if we can look at their final stats down here. The Thief, I think, always gets luck. Yeah, Thief has 1 luck per level always, and then really good agility growth. Whereas the Bard, let me see, has good luck growth, although not perfect. And basically the same agility growth as the Thief overall. So what does that give us? That's a not quite Thief tier runner that has some weaker support. Well, okay, I have to think. Give me a second here. I'm not only thinking about them unpromoted. The thief, unpromoted thief versus bard, I think the bard has the edge, but the thief does get a significant bonus once he's a ninja, and the bard doesn't get much on promotion. 2 songs per hide, and the limit that lets you stack them. But the ninja's definitely much better at that point. There are some special harps. There's an auto harp that starts you the battle with 1 random song, so you could skip a bunch of songs you don't like and always start with 1. There's also a sleep harp that starts with casting sleep on all the enemies. So it has some utility. I think I'm still going to keep him in D tier there. Sorry, bard lovers. If you want a support character, there's a dancer. I don't think support characters are very good in Final Fantasy 1 Renaissance. And there are better support characters if you want them. I would say the white mage is a better support with the big heals. So green and bard are kind of chilling down here in the sometimes useful, but mostly not super useful support. And I'm not saying you can't get some value out of them. I'm just saying I would pick a dancer over a bard any day. I would probably pick a white mage over a green mage any day. I would probably take a thief over anyone. Like, generally, if I was just starting a party based on 1 character, like, you know, you can try to figure out a good balance once you've got 1 or 2 selected. But my first pick, if I'm like, what do I want to base my party around? Very rarely would I pick a bard or a green mage. And they have relatively low synergies as well. The bard can buff up magic or attack, but other people can do it better for the most part. Yeah, that's my story. Okay, moving on. We still got 3 to go. Sure, it's just a casual 2-hour episode, no big deal. I mean, I'm trying to be thorough. Okay, Dark Knight, another fighter style. This one gets 3% hit growth as well, and 2% magic defense. However, their actual stat growths are really bad. Their strength growth is good, but everything else, especially luck, this is the worst luck character in the game. So, solo Dark Knight, spoilers, real bad. Great at killing stuff, really bad at running from things. So bad that, in terms of solo challenges, this is actually a very difficult solo challenge. Without stat maxing, anyway. So the gimmick with these guys, if you're not aware, is their weapons are 2-handed, effectively, so no shields, and they tend to do amazing damage, but bad hit, like negative hit. Compared to a rapier for level 1, this is double damage, with usually a high crit rate, and a really large hit percent penalty. So they're very rarely getting multi-attacks, at least in the early game. They do have an ability that I think is, in a 4-person group, mostly useless. In a solo challenge, occasionally useful, but generally not worth the turn. The problem is you spend a turn to activate it, and then for 2 turns you steal half of the HP you deal. Which is okay, but there's generally better uses for your turns, really. I think it's... If you don't have any healing on the team, maybe, but I think it's better to use heal potions after combat. He does get some black magic spells. We'll talk about those for a bit, but they're mostly garbage. He resists darkness, doesn't really matter. And then the main thing is he needs the synergy. He needs a blinded target, and then he just destroys them. So if someone else can cast dark, maybe not the dark spell, but the dark effect, like a non-elemental dark, or a time elemental dark, or something, then he's cooking. But on his own, he's okay. But he lags behind like the fighter and the dragoon without the enemies being darked. And I think he starts a little slower in general because he's gonna miss a lot. Like if I were to buy him his weapon, it doesn't matter. We'll just move it over. Although he has negative hit, that doesn't mean he'll never hit. Like the actual calculation for hit rate is not, impossible. But he will miss a lot. Although when he hits, he just destroys things, right? 26 damage is crazy. So, the Dark Knight... the Dark Knight... It's tough. Do I have one with all the spells? Yeah. So... most of the black magic here is not amazing. Let's just leave it like that. The best spell he has is probably Bio 2, which is similar to Fire 2, just nothing is really weak to poison. But he gets a good sweeper. He doesn't get as many spell slots as a black mage, like level 26 compared to a time mage. You can kind of see like the standard spell slot. You know, that I think the time mage has the standard black-white spell progression. This is less, you know, so he's never going to get as many charges, but Bio 2 is pretty good. Doesn't really work very well against undead and stuff, so it's not as good as Fire 2, but, you know, this will kill stuff at sea and like ogres and stuff pretty well. I find the chances of darkness hitting is very low as a spell. Lots of things resist status, and he doesn't get great intelligence. I'll talk about his stats a little bit more, that's right, first. So his stat growths are terrible. Once promoted, you can go eat all those bats, and then it catches his stats up, and he becomes actually very good for stats. His 36 luck looks great right now at level 26. However, that's only because we ate all the bats. That's a post-promotion thing, which I think should be not promotion locked, honestly. But yeah, the gimmick there is bad growths, but you can get some freebie stats. Most of his spells are pretty bad. I'm not going to talk about them all, but I very rarely can find a time to use them, other than maybe Bio 2. I think his regular attack is better almost always. He can do some of the most insane damage. If he's hasted and enemies are blinded, I think he might do more damage than a black belt. Maybe a level 50 black belt steals the edge, but he can hit. I mean, his weapon is just. I mean, I gave him a Massa right now, but even using the Buster Sword or something. I mean, he's only level 26. Keep that in mind. But once he starts getting like 3 attacks, the base damage is so high. He cuts through a lot of enemies with high absorb really well. It does feel really good, so it's hard to put a value on that. He does get a cool promotion thing that lets him do actually a lot of damage. This is a really good sweep spell. Non-elemental. I forget. I tried to calculate the damage. This is what Exuviate wishes it would be, basically. It doesn't work on undead, but it can reliably kill most groups. Once your HP is fairly high, which he gets a lot of HP, that will actually kill a lot of groups turn 1. His limit is garbage. Never use it. And he does get a special skill that lets him do more damage when he's closer to death. So that's part of it. He's got a lot of ways to do a ton of damage. So that all said, he's a simple enough character. Very simple to use, other than he likes the synergy for blinding. Where do we put him? He's in, like, the martial category, but I think he's definitely worse than a Dragoon. Although fairly similar. I think I'm gonna put him... It's kind of keeping the curve here, the bell curve a little bit. I think top of B. I would definitely say he's more consistently useful than a black belt. The Dancer in the early game is not... Like, the Dancer in the late game is crazy, but the Dark Knight is pretty good from the beginning. I'm gonna put him above the Black Mage. He gets black spells, he's got Bio 2, like, you know, he's good. I guess I have a favoritism for people with armor and swords, but... Legitimately, these guys can solo the game, take a hit, and kill enemies all very effectively. Kind of in this... Anything in A and B, I think, is pretty darn good. And then there's a... Like, A and B kind of mix together a little bit, but the jump between B and C, I think, is very clear. And then D is quite bad. Okay, I'm happy with that for now. I got 2 left. Alright, let's power through. Do I have any spell blades? No. I'll have to make one. I think I have a hunter we can look at too. Okay, so Spellblade. Now, these guys really, really saddened me. I'm gonna double check their stats again, although I'm pretty sure I remember. Excuse me. They are another 2% hit growth class. Even though they are arguably a melee class, their growth rates are not great. Where are we here? Spellblade. Yeah, 2 hit, 2 magic defense. And they start, like, 7 hits, not that much. It's less than a warrior or a fighter. Same as a red mage, actually. So I think their equipment and stat line are more in common with a red mage, actually, than a fighter. And their armor is similar, too, if I remember correctly. They can wear some good armor, but not all of it. Maybe a little bit better than the red mage, but not like fighter, Dragoon, Dark Knight tier. So we've got a martial character that's decent, but probably the worst of the martials in that sense, if we're just thinking of physical damage. They do, by bringing a Spellblade, you unlock a bunch of free elemental swords, and this is where they are theoretically trying to keep up with a fighter. So, as long as you have an elemental weapon equipped, they do 50% base damage up. So that means their weaker strength and hit percent kind of keep up with a fighter. I think not. They don't actually keep up with a fighter. It's close, but not quite equivalent. Losing that 1% hit percent, 1% hit growth per level is actually pretty bad. And they don't have as great strength growth, so it really only works if you have like a lightning weapon fighting a lightning weak enemy. And unfortunately, the weapon selection doesn't work that well. Plus, you know, a spellcaster, you can have a random encounter and select the spell to hit the weakness. For weapons, you can't change them mid-battle, really. For the most part, we'll talk about it. But whatever weapon you have equipped, you equip and bring into fight. And you don't know what you're going to fight necessarily, you might have an idea. But it's, a lot of the weapons, there's like earth swords and water swords and wind swords. And like, there's basically nothing weak to those. And we don't get the flame sword until Volcano, or ice, I guess, technically. And we don't get the ice sword until Volcano or Ordeals. So that's pretty late in terms of the hard part of the game. And other than that, most of his elemental swords are not super effective. At least they're not getting that 100% bonus. He can also spend a turn to give that same trait to allies. I think this is always a waste of time. I basically can never find a round where this is worth doing. Because his physical damage is decent, this is giving up a decent attack to make someone else kind of overkill something. It's generally not worth it, in my opinion. Pretty niche. So, what makes this guy good or bad? Unfortunately, his spells, enchant, are just, they're dumb. He can get Fire, Ice, Lightning enchant, but it takes a turn to activate, and it's only single target. And it's so niche that, I mean, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad as far as spells go. It's not evoker level bad, but it's pretty bad. Once you're promoted, you can level them up to level 2 versions of all the elements. There's a lot of elements that literally do nothing. Like I said, basically nothing is weak to water and wind and stuff. Level 8 gives you Holy Sword, but, you know, there's not very many enemies that you need to use that are undead that you need to kill by the time you have a level 8 spell. I'm having a hard time thinking of where I'm going to rank him. He does unlock a cool bonus boss that's pretty tough. And once you kill the bonus boss, he finally gets a skill that lets him enchant someone and attack at the same time. It's basically cast a spell and attack. And, you know, if he just started with that, that'd be a different story. But spending a turn to cast enchant is almost always worse than attacking. So that's the main thing. And there's not much else to talk about with him. He's a mid-tier fighter with the spells that frustrate me more than I wish they did. So how do I rank this guy? Well, I'm gonna start in B and think about it. I was originally thinking he was like maybe C, or I think he's better than the Bard or the Green Mage. Let's start from the bottom. Does he beat a Thief? Yeah, he's got better weapons and armor than a Thief. Yeah. Is he better than a Beastmaster? Probably. Similar weapons and armor, but better by a small margin. Less utility. Would I rather have him than a White Mage? Maybe. The White Mage just, a lot of times, does nothing. his regular attack is at least pretty solid, and he's got, like I said, decent armor. Geommancer, yeah. I think I move him into B tier. He clearly a step above all the C's. Does he beat a black belt? I have to think about this one. It depends if you're going to grind. You know, late game black belt smushes everything. I think, given that my tier list here is kind of based on somewhat efficient play, we're not focusing on a level 50 end game or even 40 or 30 plus. At mid levels, he probably still beats the black belt most of the time. Dancer, in the early game, you know, in the inner C area, he's better than the Dancer. But I think as soon as the Dancer gets to Melman, she's way better. I'm going to leave him here. This is his final spot for now. He's probably one of the weaker martial characters, and I think it's more just disappointing. He's not bad, but I think Spellblade, or Mystic Knight in Final Fantasy V was one of my favorite combos, and I was just very disappointed. I was most disappointed by the Summoner, but this was like my second most disappointing class, where it took somebody I love from a different game and made them kind of bad. Now, he's obviously not too far down the tier list. It's not that far down. That's okay. You know what? I'm pretty much okay with him being in the middle. I'm not too mad about that. He does get one more thing after promotion I didn't mention. He gets the Runic ability, where he can absorb spells, but it's enemy or ally spells, so it can interfere with your own casting. And it's a bit finicky to use, definitely not easy. It can stop Chaos from casting Cure 4 or Nuke. But it's very hard to control. Well, you can't control enemy. I can show. Let me switch to the bestiary here. If we're talking about someone with a lot of spells, like the Eye, in theory, you could Runic and try to catch a Quad X or a Brack. But really, the special attack should be split in half, because if the Eye gets a turn, he will choose between attacking, casting a spell, or using a skill. The skills start at Glance. Glance, Squint, Gaze, Stare, and you cannot Runic those. The spells start at Quad X, and every enemy goes through their spell list in order. So he will cast Quad X if he of the three options, attack, magic, skill. Each enemy kind of has its own percentage bias to which one it uses every round. But it could just attack and you waste your Runic. Or it could use a skill and waste your Runic. But if it uses spell, then you might be able to catch it with Runic. But some of them are better than others, so you need to know Quad X doesn't matter. Brack is bad, well, Runic for that. But instead of using Brack, it could use Glance, and then it doesn't matter. Runic did nothing. Maybe you should just attack them. So this is a good example of why Runic is, like, good, but it's really hard to use, and honestly, attacking is probably better most of the time. Like I said, there's a couple specific times when it would be better. I think if you had it from, like, pre-promote, like if you started with it, it would have a lot more value, because you could round one Runic and not get rubbed by Astos, which would be great, because this is the classic first caster that kills people. But yeah, that's just the way the Runic ability works, so it's okay. It does charge up his abilities. I didn't mention it because it's mostly worthless, but if you do Runic enough spells, you can attack all at the same time, or use Enchant all for your allies, and those are cool, but it takes a lot of charge up, and honestly, the Dragoon will have killed everything, or the fighter or the mages would have killed everything by then. So even though he can get a little stronger, it's kind of like one use. You get 3 charges of spells, and then you fight all or enchant all, but then you go back down to 0 charges. And also, you can't use Runic after you've absorbed 3 spells. So, you know, it's, again, a little fiddly. Not bad. I think middle of the road is fine for him. And the final 2 hour and 15 minute, the final class, the Archer. I'm not a huge fan of this one. Looking up their stats, this is a 3% hit growth class, which excites me, but he does not get 2 attacks with a bow ever. He's got a special mechanic that I hate. And I've talked about it when I did runs with the Archer in the past. I'm not going to go through all the math with you guys. But effectively, is it? Every mechanic he has frustrates me. Instead of just doing multi-attacks like everybody else, he just does one large damage attack with his bow. But that means it has a lot wider range of damage. Let's say in mid-levels, most fighters are doing 3 attacks with like silver tier weapons or flame swords stuff. Instead of doing like 3 hits for 200, where each hit is like 60 damage or so-ish. I don't know, maybe that's a little high, but something like that. He might have the same average damage, but he could roll 50 instead of averaging around 200. Maybe he could do 400, but extra damage is overkill that doesn't matter, and lower damage is bad because then you don't kill the enemy. Whereas the fighters and dragoons and dark knights are far more reliably just killing their targets every turn. And that's important because he needs to kill things to get crafting materials. This is a mechanic that seems cool, but I hate it because the hunter has to kill with a bow, maybe a knife, but he has to kill with a regular attack to get a drop of material that he can use to craft special arrows that he can only use with a bow. I find in a normal 4-man party, you get so few resources unless you specifically grind for them that you might as well forget about it. Even in a solo archer run, I had to grind to get enough fangs against imps. It was so annoying. So I'm not a huge fan of that mechanic. So bow, not amazing. Materials, I think you need to be able to buy them or something. And that's the poaching thing there, I guess, specifically. Poaching, that's the one that you kill to get materials, and then you craft them from the menu. Similarly, in terms of things I consider bad mechanics, aim, you get 120% damage for every turn you charge, up to 3 turns. You're giving up damage now to do more damage next turn. And it is more than double, yes. But in the time it takes you to charge it up, someone else has probably killed the enemy. And, like, I cannot think of a good situation for this. I can think of one. On the first turn of a tough boss, someone casts Fast on your hunter, so he gets 2 attacks instead of 1, or Fast 2 to get 3. And someone else uses the Power Glove on him. He aims to do double damage, because maybe on the first turn he would have attacked before the buffs came in. And then on the second turn, he is hasted, he is buffed up by temper and stuff, and he unloads for a big damage. Realistically, though, that doesn't really ever matter. There's other people that can... I don't know, it's just that's such a specific use. Other than that, aim is basically always bad, I think. It's good in games where there's counters. In Final Fantasy 4 and 5 especially, and 6, I guess, there's a lot of bosses especially, and just random encounters that if you hit them, they counterattack you. And therefore, you want to do less number of attacks that do lots of damage to kill them instantly so you don't get countered. This would work great in Final Fantasy 4. That's why Yang uses Focus as a monk to charge up so he doesn't get countered to death. However, that's not our thing. In addition to being a martial character that's focusing on damage, we don't get any armor. So we can't even stand in the front like a fighter or a dragoon. We get pretty bad armor. Our damage is mid, I will say, like not great, but probably on the weaker side for melee, like for damage dealers, martial damage dealers. So the only really, I've talked about a lot of bad things. The good thing is some of his special shots are very good. This one is bad. This does not stack. -4 to 8 damage is nothing. Maybe in the very early game it helps a little bit, but later on it does nothing. A 50% chance to paralyze, however, maybe a 100% chance against giants. That's pretty good, as long as you got enough fangs and hides. Wing shot basically never matters. Removes status touch, but you just kill things. Like, I don't think this is worth thinking about. Tail is cool in the fact that it's a 100% chance to slow the Kraken. That's nice. Not much else you care about for that shot. Scale shot reduces defense, kind of like Fang shot. It's not enough to matter. It doesn't stack. You'd think this would work well against Tiamat. It does not. It's not enough of a difference. Silence, again, spellcasters against like Carry, the Lich, stuff like that. 100% chance to silence them. Very good. So we've got kind of a fiend disabler here. There are other jobs that can disable them also quite effectively, but these ones are not resisted by like status protection or whatever. If they have the innate resist silence, like Chaos has, it won't work. So you can't silence Chaos. But against Lich, at least, it works very well. Headshot, blind is garbage, doesn't matter. Confusion is okay. Stone is great. It's a chance to just insta-kill some things. And then Spirit Shot, I think, is basically worthless. This is magic defense reduction. There's very few times where this is... It's actually kind of hard to grind the materials out, too. Ashes and gels are kind of hard to get. Well, to be fair, he has a hard time getting materials in general. Gels are like only from slimes, and ashes are from undead. If anyone, and sadly, even if he has like a mage staff or a light axe, if he uses magic to kill enemies via items, he doesn't get the materials either. So it's very difficult to get a lot of those. So I generally rate these as, unless you want to do specific grinds, you're only going to get a couple arrows. And yes, they make some bosses much easier, but you can't use them very regularly is the main thing. As much as Paralyze is strong, and it does work against Chaos, 50-50 chance to paralyze the final boss, you're going to have to work to grind 12 of these out, basically, if you want. So that's kind of my general thoughts on the Hunter. I think I have one that I can show at higher levels here. Does he have anything special? Oh, Hunter's Mark. Yeah. So once you're promoted, he does get a top tier skill. This only works if you've got someone else in the party that needs crits, but this always goes first and gives a guaranteed crit. I think all hits become crits for that target. So if someone has a mass immune, which is a classically very high damage, very low crit, I mean 5% is not 0, but it's not a crit weapon like a katana or these great swords. But basically, if you've got someone with crazy good damage, and this is what we did with this party. What am I trying to say? You just go first, give a crit to somebody else, and they do like 5,000 damage. Unfortunately, once you are promoted, this becomes all that the ranger does. You just, like, I really think that's so much better than his attack or his aim. That's basically the only thing that matters. Even his best bow is not doing very much damage. That's the Yoichi bow. I think that's as good as it gets. And, his damage is higher than this because, the hit percent turns into damage in some ratio. But it's not great. And honestly, just giving crits out becomes his best use. So at the end of the day, he becomes a support character that just gives out crits at the end. He does have a cool limit. It's pretty strong, once per dungeon. You can see trap tiles, sure. But yeah, that's about it. That covers all the archers stuff, I think. So, let's put him in the list. Where does that put him? Is he B tier? I'm rating him mostly based on his first half of the game. Hunter's Mark, if you started with it, on its own, that would probably be good enough to say he's maybe high B tier. I think because he doesn't get it till the end of the game when usually things are easy, not very helpful. I really dislike grinding materials for his arrows, even though they're pretty good at boss disabling. He does not reliably kill enemies in one shot. He does not reliably sweep enemies. I think the Monk and the Spellblade are both better at single target death. The Black Mage is way better at AoE death, and the Dancer is just overall more utility, enough to be holding into B tier. I think it's C. Thief or Hunter? The Hunter does more than the Thief in the first half of the game. That luck stat is good on the Thief, but it's just not enough to... And, well... Maybe there's some of those searchable items. Maybe that makes him a little bit more valuable. I don't know. I think he's C tier. It's just a matter of where. You know what? I actually think I'm going to put him at the bottom of C. I think his closest competition is the Thief, and I'd rather have a Thief, honestly. I don't like grinding for materials. He doesn't kill stuff... Like, he kills stuff better than the Thief, yes. But the Thief, once promoted, is better. Yeah, sorry, Archer lovers. I think he's the 4th worst character. Okay, so that's the full list. I think I'm pretty happy with my tier list. Let me know if you've made your own in the comments. Maybe I can make a link to this and share it in the description. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, all that stuff. I didn't talk, bonus round. How would I fix the characters if they need fixing? I'm going to try to do this kind of quick because we're already 2.5 hours in. Time God honestly needs nerfs, not buffs, so we're not fixing him. Fighter, all he needs is his final quest to be better. Don't give up the Excalibur to get that shield. Otherwise, he's perfect. I still think he's probably the top of the pack outside of the Time Mage. Even with a relatively weak Paladin quest and an optional quest that's mostly worthless. He's still just that good. Red Mage probably doesn't need any buffs. He's good. I think a couple of his, like one of his late spells, it's like it adds any status effect. I forget exactly what it says, but like it inflicts enemies with random statuses. I think maybe as a level 8 spell that he has a hard time even casting. Maybe that should be like not including blind or a couple of the weaker statuses. But I don't know. I don't want it to be too powerful, but it is a level 8 spell. And he doesn't get very many level 8 slots. The other thing for Red Mage might be, what was it? There was something else about him I was going to say. Brain. Come on, Brain. You can do it. It's a long video. This is breaking me. I'm trying to go quick. There was something else with Red Mage. Oh, the fact that his armor is Thief locked. I don't like that some of the ultimate weapons and armor are blocked behind Thief. So maybe let him get his Red Wizard armor without a Thief. That'd be nice. I think that was it for Red Mage. He doesn't really need any big changes. Yeah, he's fine. Blue Mage. Really strong. I think some shuffling of enemy skills would be nice. Toxic should just be deleted. I would love him to have a couple more support spells from the other Final Fantasies switched in. But he's great. And very usable all the way through the game. And his promotion skill is so... Oh, his limit is bad. I think he could use a better limit. I don't know what, but his limit just gives him guaranteed learning, which doesn't matter by the time you get it. You've already learned most of them. So bad limit. I can't remember everyone's limits perfectly well, but yeah. These A tier people don't need much to change. It's fine. They're good. Dragoon. Does he need any fixes? Yeah, let him equip a shield. He should have a shield, totally. Technically, it would interfere with his boot slot, so you'd have to choose. Do you want to equip the leaping boots to let you go first, or have your shield for armor? I think that's a good change. Let him have the shield. Nobody else uses shields except the fighter, really. So, and the ninja, sort of. But there's a lot of like high tier shields no one can use except the fighter. So he should probably have shields. It's already the Kane thing, right? Dragoons can... I think even Final Fantasy V Dragoons can use shields. Spears did not become two-handed until... In Final Fantasy VI, they were one-handed. There weren't shields in 7. Freya in 9? Did she get a shield? It might have been two-handed for Final Fantasy 9. I can't remember it well enough. But I think she might have been able to have a shield, too. I don't know. I feel like traditionally Dragoons have shields. Anyway, they're A-class, always good. The Dark Knight, I think, should have death protection once he's a Death Knight. It doesn't even really make a difference, but he should just thematically get it. I think some of the Dark Knight spells need some rebalancing. They don't need to be much stronger, they just need to be more useful. And I think like his blood weapon would be a lot better if it attacked, it didn't cost you an action. Maybe it could have fatigue or something. I'd rather it was like drain some HP, but you can't do it every turn, than waste a turn to drain some HP later. I think that's a bit on the low side, like low quality. His limit's pretty bad. But otherwise, like, he's a good character. Still, B is still good. Like, great, good, average. I guess I don't really have an average tier the way this worked out. I still think he's above average. But yeah, I'd say Blood Weapon could use a slight tweak. I think A tier doesn't need any improvements, just some, like, quality of life. B is, like, maybe they need some small improvements. And, like, Blood Weapon and his limit could be slightly tweaked. Death Elemental Protection would be nice. But otherwise, some spell changes, just to make sure they're not garbage. I'd like all of his spells to at least be viable. As is, I basically never use anything ever, because they're worse than attacking. Almost all of them. So, Enchant Dark needs something. I don't know. He just needs a little bit of a... like, he's not a black mage, but he needs some spells that help. Black mage. Oof. It'd be nice if Bluff didn't cost him an action. I think Bluff is the weakest ability the black mage has, because it spends an action to buff other people's intelligence. And intelligence boosting is like a pretty small effect. It might be better if it worked like the fighter thing, where he's just plus 50% magic damage, and he could take advantage of it on the second turn, as well as everyone else on the first turn. It's fine. Black mage is great. Of all the classes, he does not need much of a change, I don't think. Yeah. Dancer, I think they should start with dual wield, honestly. It wouldn't change much. You don't have access to the crazy good daggers until late game anyway, so having 2 small knives isn't going to make you incredibly strong. You're still scaling more based on getting access to the rare weapons, and you generally only get 1 of each of the rare weapons, so it's not that bad. A couple of the dances are a little bit weak. I don't like the quick step dance very much. I guess like the tempo, the tango is so strong that it makes other dances hard to compete with it for debuffs, but they're good overall. I think the braver mechanics are fine. Yeah, the only thing would be maybe starting with dual wielding, because I don't think that would make her, like, that's just quality of life. It would make her, because she's a bit weak in the early game, she's got no armor, and her damage output's pretty bad until she gets promoted. So she'd be a little bit more competitive with the other damage dealers. And maybe Quick Step could use a slight improvement. Or, unfortunately, lowering the base percentage on... I actually think the Tango should be a little bit weaker. Not that it shouldn't stack the way it does. I just think it should have a smaller starting reduction. Like, I think it starts at, like, minus 30% or something. Maybe it should start at minus 20% and take a little bit more turns to completely neuter enemies to 1 damage. Maybe just take a couple extra turns to get there would be fine. So a little debuff, a little buff, and she'd be, I think, a more balanced character. Spellblade, he needs a big rework on a couple things, I think. This guy has some big problems. The only reason he's B tier at all is because he has access to good swords. If we're going to stick with 2% hit growth and weaker strength compared to the martials, you've really got to make sure he's got the right elemental swords to take advantage of things, or being able to cast a spell and attack the turn he casts it. And that's really, I think, the main change. It's what he gets from the optional super boss right now. If he just started with that, I think he would be competitive, because then you wouldn't need to equip the fire sword to fight something weak to fire. You could have your best sword, cast enchant fire from one of your spell slots. You know, you've got a resource to manage, and then attack immediately with it, and that would be fine. I also think Runic, maybe you should start with that at unpromoted, because it's a bit of a mixed bag on how helpful it is. But the best cases for it are fighting Astos and the Lich, and mages in Ice Cave. So the fact that we don't even get access to it until after that, when it doesn't really matter very much, it's kind of pointless, right? So if you just started with it, I still don't think you'd use Runic very often, but I'd rather start with it. And I think that would balance him out. So a slight tweak to how spell magic works, enchant magic works, and maybe start with Runic. That'd be fine. I think he needs a bit of a buff, because he's got less attack, hit rate, and defense than the other martials, like less armor and less hit percent and less strength. So he needs something to keep him up, because he doesn't do much else. Also, grinding the level 2 spells sucks. So either don't grind them, or make using those spells and getting kills with them reliably fun and easy. And if you can cast and kill from the beginning, that will do it. Because I can see locking... Well, I actually don't know if I'd even lock the level 2 spells behind promotion, honestly. I know it makes sense to have promotion stuff unlock cool things, but in terms of balance, because I'm mostly thinking balance right now, promotion is so late in the game. Think about how vanilla NES worked. Promotion didn't give you skills or anything. We already have limits from promotion. All the promotion gave you in the base game was access to the top tier weapons and armor and the final couple levels of spells. That is still the case here. We could still lock the best weapons, the best armor, the best spells behind promotion. And that is the same mechanic as vanilla. And I'll even say leave the limit break until after promotion. But locking general utility skills and passives behind it, I'm not 100% sold on. Maybe upgrading them, I think I've talked about before, where some passives maybe start weaker. Like maybe his Bladecraft starts at... Well, I mean, he just gets it all the time, but I'm like trying to think of something that you could improve at promotion rather than... So for instance, if he had the skill that let him enchant a weapon and attack, but it had like once per battle or fatigue 2 or 3 or something, so you couldn't just fire enchant yourself and then your friend and then your other friend and then ice enchant your friend. Like you couldn't just spam it unpromoted, and then once you're promoted, it would remove that cost, and then you could just use it every turn in battle if that's what you wanted to do. Something like that, so it gets better rather than having really like 2/3 of the hardest part of the game not having access to it. I think that would be my general balance design for some of these skills, is try to give most of them away at base class, and then either lock them behind some fatigue or once per battle mechanic, and then make them a little better post-promotion. That's, I think, a more fun way. And better, easier to balance. Black Belt. I mean, he's the standard slow grow, starts weak, gets overpowered. I think the key mechanics are a good idea to try to give him some more utility outside of single target punching. I think he should just get 1 key point when he attacks. There is a quest that gives him that, I believe, if I remember. I've only actually done 1 Black Belt run. I have not played Black Belt very much because it's very boring in Renaissance. But if he started with recovering a key point when either killing or hitting an enemy, that would let him bounce between offense and support abilities, and maybe having a couple different key abilities that are a little bit more useful, because his heal is pretty weak. But I would like to see him with some of the Sabin blitzes, and maybe more than he's got. And you could learn a couple more at promotion or something, right? But either start with more key points or recover them more actively. Spending a turn to just charge and do nothing just doesn't seem right. And that's going to hold him back compared to other good classes. It makes me basically not use the key system hardly at all, other than for experimentation. Other than that, the counterattack ability is fine. I think he's fine. I don't know why you can't use Temper and Power Glove on him. I know it's like sharpening a sword, but I mean, come on, let the guy get the Temper buff as well. He doesn't need to get nerfed. His damage isn't that much higher than the rest of the team at normal levels. It's only when you're over-leveled that it's crazy. Geomancer, start with sample 100% from the very beginning. I also think they should have access to the rare spells, the rare terrain spells, that you can only get from the random cast. They should also be available from your manual selection, albeit with less charges, like maybe only make half as many. Like if you've got, maybe you don't get them at level 1, like whatever the learning curve is, they start with, of the 4 spell slots that you get at base level 1, they go up like couple level ups, and it's 2 at like 2-1-1-1, and then 2-2-1-1. And eventually you get, I think, 4 or 5 of each spell at high levels. I think the 2 rare terrain spells should also be included, and just half as many charges or something like that. That'd be cool, because then you get to see them more often, because they're super rare, and I barely saw any in my playthroughs, and I've done quite a few Geomancer runs. I think sample is mandatory. I also think sample should probably recharge at an inn, rather than having to backtrack to the other dungeon to recharge it. Once you've set it as this is my terrain magic that I'm bringing from the volcano, I think you should be able to recharge that at the inn, maybe even at a house. It's pretty much the same thing. Just to save on backtracking, basically. It's a lot more, it's just a quality of life thing. Other than that, that's the main difference. I think being a little bit more obvious with the damage on his spells would be nice. It'd be nice if the game, I don't know how you'd do it and not like have too much info, but I wish the game showed how strong the different terrain spells were, so that I could kind of get a feel for if they were going to kill an enemy or not. And they might need a bit of a bump. if your level 10 Geomancer uses an AoE and it does like 20 damage to all the enemies, it's so much worse than Fire 2 and Lightning 2. Like, I'm not saying that it should do the same damage as a Black Mage who's focused on specific elements. I think Geomancer should have access to other elements, like water and wind and holy and whatever other stuff, but do slightly less base damage than a Black Mage, unless you have the Bell, in which case they, you're really like focusing on a specific element, and then you should probably compete with the Black Mage. Otherwise, they're always going to be worse than the Black Mage, right? So I think to keep the Geomancer on par with approximately the Black Mage's power, they now that we're in C tier, there's some buffs required, I think, for sure. And Geomancer, I think, is fun, but kind of needs a little bit of help. White Mage, oh, I don't know if I would change much. They're so vanilla. I guess the thing, and it will come up with the Green Mage more, anti-spells should maybe have priority, so they go first in the round. I think a lot of the White Mage support buffs should just go first, so that at least if you're spending a spell slot and an action to prevent, you know, enemies from putting you to stone or hitting with a big lightning spell, at least we know the White Mage will go before the enemy. That would do a little to help them. Obviously, they've got all the healing and resurrecting stuff. They're fine. The reason they're at a fairly low rank is just because their focus is mostly on support. In Renaissance, you know, I'd be happy for them to get a couple new hammers. Some side quests or optional something where they can get like an elemental hammer or something that's got a little bit more kick to it. That'd be nice. Like some options. I think they've always been based on D&D clerics, and clerics in D&D are not like no melee damage. They're not weak like a wizard in melee usually. They're generally pretty formidable in melee combat, typically with a hammer or a mace type thing. So I would be probably happy to see a couple more melee weapons for the White Mage. It's obviously, we don't want them to be strong like a martial, but because they've got the 1% hit growth, they would need a very powerful hammer to keep up even close at all to the martials. And I think maybe they should. Their healing magic, maybe they should always do less damage than a martial character, but they should have enough damage that you don't feel like you're wasting a turn attacking. Because right now you just pray every turn for the passive healing. But I'd wish there was more of a choice. Like, should I attack and do at least some damage? Because right now their hammer damage is basically nothing. Yeah, that might be something to help them out. Because if you had a little bit more options, especially in the early game, you know, that might be a bit, right? So it would need to be like an early game hammer. Something before the silver hammer, and then something before the Thor's hammer is probably what I'm thinking. Maybe elemental. Actually, giving them a holy elemental hammer somewhere around Marsh Cave so that they can bonk an undead for big damage, that'd be pretty good. It wouldn't be as good as casting harm, but like a couple little things like that, and I think maybe I would give them a +1. Also, if you could give them a spell that protects against paralyze, it would really help. I know it's not a vanilla spell, but delete anti-mute and give them anti-paralyze. Nothing does mute, it doesn't matter. But a level 4 spell that you could technically get before Marsh, although it's pretty high level for Marsh, but certainly for Earth and Ice, a level 4 spell that protects from paralyze as an AoE, and maybe with priority, it's costing a spell slot, right? It's not free, but otherwise your level 4 spell slots are worthless. So like that's the kind of thing, a slight tweak to some spells, especially like if you want the White Mage to be healing and anti-caster and anti-elemental, like that would do a lot. Although maybe that's treading on Green Mage a little bit, we'll see. Anyway, it's hard to say what the White Mage needs, but like they do their job good. They're really good at healing and resurrecting, but I would like them to be a little bit more competitive. Beastmaster needs to start with capturing from the beginning, needs maybe 3% hit growth to keep up with the damage, but it's not too bad. Capturing, I think summoning needs to attack when you summon. Spending a turn to summon your creature is pretty bad. I think if it just did an attack or a spell the turn you summoned it, that would help a lot. It could even be random, like either it attacks or uses a skill if it has one. Like, I don't even care if you get to control who it targets. As long as it does something when you summon it, that would be great. I think the pet food mechanic needs a bit of a retweak. I think you should be able to heal your monster either automatically at the end of combat or at the very least at an inn or something for sure. Or just regenerating as you walk around. I think I've seen some games that do that where monsters, like allies, they just heal, 1% per step or something, right? Kind of like a Titan Bangle from Final Fantasy VI. Just so the monster has a way of healing up between fights, and then you'd use them more often. I feel like that's the big thing, right? What's the point of the Beastmaster? They're supposed to be capturing and using monsters. So you want the player to use them. So they need to not waste a turn, and they need to not die too easily. I mean, they can still die, but like, let's not make it too easy. And I think that would be enough. I think they shouldn't be the axe specialist. I think we should have a different class for axes, like a Viking from FF3, or maybe a Berserker, maybe. I'm not a huge fan of them, but somebody that does axes that's not a whip guy. Let this guy focus on whips and medium armor, and just really good at capturing and controlling monsters. That would be enough, I think. The Thief, well, I like what they did in the remakes, where they give him a lot of hit percent and low strength. I think they should do that. Give him 3% or maybe even 4% hit growth. Keep his strength and weapons bad, but at least he's doing a lot of attacks for low damage, and he won't feel so bad as a thief. He did get buffed a lot in terms of luck and running. I also think the search items need to be slightly better on average, if I was being honest. I don't really like their lock behind bringing the thief. I don't know, it's hard to balance. I kind of wish the thief showed you where they were, and then you could always get them on a run. And then if you have a thief, I don't know, maybe he can find his own ultimate gear, but I don't want, like, forced party compositions just to get the ultimate weapon, basically. Maybe the thief is... You need a thief in the party to get the ultimate thief weapon, but there isn't one right now, so it doesn't really matter. I mean, the katana is as good as it gets, but... yeah, thief is... You still want him to be pretty weak in terms of martial combat, but I think he needs a buff a little bit more in terms of physical prowess. His armor is bad. His weapon selection is really bad, is the problem. Although the weapon effectiveness in Renaissance I didn't mention, that definitely helps. The fact that the Rune Blade does bonus damage to magic enemies definitely helps him a lot. But yeah, I could see with a little bit more buff at least, maybe. For ninjas, they're pretty solid. I still think the hit percent penalty is rough. He'd be a lot happier with 3% hit growth as a ninja, because he lags behind number of attacks, which is bad. If you're trying to do like just melee damage. The ninja spells are still solid. The ninja scrolls are good and quite expensive. I think that's fine. There's a kind of a weird mechanic with how the scrolls work, applying elemental debuffs after you use them. I think that might need a relook, because I don't think it works the way I think it should. I think, like, if you use, like, a fire scroll, I can't remember which element, but let's say it makes them weak to ice or something, whatever. I think if the enemy is naturally resistant to ice, it doesn't actually do anything. I think if you're going to use these 5,000 gold scrolls that do, I think, around Fire 3 level spell, the synergy should apply the weakness no matter what, because we're talking multiple turns of setup with a literal resource expense that's not, like, you can't really use it until pretty late in the game anyway, because they're very expensive. And especially since a lot of the scrolls are like water weakness or wind weakness, they're spells that almost no one has. It would be really cool if you could give that weakness to the Geommancer and it actually reliably worked. So you could use whatever gives the water weakness scroll, and then the Geomancer's got that water spell ready to go, primed up with the water bell equipped, and can really unleash. That would be a really cool synergy, and given how specific it is, it should just work reliably at that point. You got to be a ninja with the right expensive scroll that gets the action, and then sets up the enemies to be weak to a different spell. And it's not killing them. Like, this is, it also needs to not kill them in one shot. So the setup here is already like a little bit too much, so it needs to work. And if it doesn't work, which I feel like it wasn't when I was testing it, that's not quite good enough. It's a mechanic that needs a little bit of a look, I think. Archer, I did talk about quite a lot. I think the bow mechanic needs a look at how the damage works. I think the materials need to be much easier to source. Like, anybody in the team killing them gets them, or you can just buy fangs. The most common one, you need fangs for all the arrows. Maybe you should just be able to buy them in Elfland or something. Maybe Melmond, I don't know. Not too early, I guess, but not for like 1,000 gold each, but you should just be able to buy them at some point. Because grinding for those is dumb. I think some of his arrows are totally useless and need a bit of a fix. Some of them are pretty good and just fine. Maybe if you have easy access to the materials, they're too strong, but I just think it needs a bit of a relook in terms of balancing. Given that he's a no armor, mostly martial attacking class, I think he's got less armor than anyone else, basically, in terms of like the fighters. So his damage output with his bow needs to be pretty solid. Like, it doesn't have to be way better than a fighter, but it should compete. And I think aim is so bad it needs to be relooked at. I don't know what it should be instead. It could be like a never miss attack that you just selected as aim and attack someone. That's how Rose's aim worked. It just did a normal attack. Maybe you could have a fatigue on it so you can't use it multiple times in a row. But an attack that never misses. Or maybe his normal attack is just one shot. But then if you use the aim ability, you get his like 32% multiplier on the hit rates for the skill, but then it has like a cooldown, so you can't do it every turn. That would do a lot of damage, but you know, you couldn't do it every single turn. Like, something like that might be better, or just give him X fight from the beginning, or at least as a promotion skill, because random targeting, like, I don't know, that might be a little bit too strong early game, but with weak bows, it's not that bad. But yeah, I think he needs a significant improvement. Bards, I think this, like I said with Bards, their songs I would prefer if they didn't just end so easily. I know that's traditional Bards, but in practice it makes me really dislike using them because it's very easy to lose your buffs, and then rebuffing takes too long. And I kind of think the harp damage maybe should be improved a little bit, but if you could attack and keep your songs going, that would do a lot to help him. And some of the songs are maybe too weak. I'm not sure how to fix them exactly. Or maybe a mechanic where you attack and pick a song. You could keep the songs pretty weak, but you would do an attack and get a song effect at the same time. Something like that might do it for Bard, and then I'd think that was pretty okay. You wouldn't have to power up the songs too much, as long as you could attack with them and keep them going. And then having the same song stacking would still be a thing for promotion or limits. Yeah, I mean, one charge of defense in the late game doesn't really matter. Like 8 absorb plus a bit of luck. Like, you're only talking maybe 13 or 14 absorb for the party. That's basically Fog 2. That's nice, but it's not a huge deal. And if you still have like a number of songs per... You could still have like... Because the Bard has like... It's kind of a weirdly limiting mechanic where they can only cast... They can only play one song, and then they have to hide to recharge. That's pretty limiting already. I'm not sure... Like, if you keep that mechanic, you would need them to be better in other ways, right? So, either get rid of that mechanic and let them just use their songs, or keep that and then have them alternate between attacking and getting a song and then hiding to recharge. That would make sense. That's kind of a Bard thing. They pop out, they do a little bit of damage, get a new song up, they disappear, and then come back next turn and do it again. As long as you don't lose the action economy too bad, like your songs aren't getting interrupted, that would probably make sense to me. And starting with maybe 1 or 2 songs, maybe even 2 or 3 would be better. Because the action economy is very important. The more turns you're doing nothing, the harder it is to value them. Green Mage, oh boy, they need a lot of looks. Exuviate needs to be very much reworked. So Green Mage is entirely a defensive buffer, and most of the buffs don't do anything. The anti-spells are very situational at best, and regen is very weak early game and then very strong late game. There's no exit, there's no life. Their damage output is garbage. Exuviate, I would completely just scrap. And the idea I had when I was playing Green Mage is actually to have a skill that converts an anti-spell into the element. Like anti-lightning would do lightning damage to all enemies. although it would be based on the level of the spell. Or I'm not sure how I would calculate the damage. You want the green mage to do less damage than a black mage, of course, because they've got healing and support. But an alternate use to the anti-spells would be a skill that might have a fatigue cost. None of this charge up nonsense, but action economy is important. Select it, cast it. It still costs a spell slot. It maybe has a turn of rest, a fatigue turn maybe. And then the damage needs to be not quite as high as an equivalent black spell. I think white mage, like support casters, generally do less damage than a pure damage caster. But anti-fire is level 2, I think anti-lightning is level 3, anti-ice is level 4. So having access to a weaker version of Fire 2, Lightning 2, Ice 2 would be fine. And also, I think to double down on it, they're supposed to be kind of druidic. I think you could include like water, wind, stone, like all the weird anti-spells that literally do nothing right now. Let them use those elements on enemies that are weak to them. And maybe, and this is where I might get a bit too much, but maybe after promotion, those anti-spells with the skill apply a status effect associated with the element. So lightning might stun them, not the permanent paralysis, but the one-turn stun, like a chance to stun. Fire, maybe burn is a thing. It's not very good, but it would be something. Ice could be slow. You know, you could kind of have an associated element with each of the anti-spells. And although she's doing less damage, she's having a chance to apply status. And would make those anti-spells actually feel relevant. You have a choice if you want to defend your party or kind of druidic elemental switch them up on the enemies. Again, you might need some fatigue. Maybe she shouldn't be able to do that every turn. But I think that would be pretty fair. And other than that, I mean, that would change a lot. I think having... Because in my mind, a druid or a green mage is not a pure healer like a white mage. I think, in my vision, a green mage would be a cross between white and black. Have some healing support spells that are good, but not as direct as Cure 4, Life 2. So they've got the regens and some of the defensive spells. But then they've got some of the offensive spells too, and maybe some weird elements that the black mage doesn't usually get. Not as high damage, but maybe status afflictions and stuff like that. Just so they have something they can do. I also think the green mage needs a green armor and some weapon. I don't know what, but like the white mage has hammers, the black mage has knives. The green mage needs something. Druids should have shillelagh. They get a special staff that does bonus damage or something. I don't know. But yeah, I think the green mage so far needs the most work to be viable, but that's kind of where my head's going on how to fix them. Obviously, I spent more time talking about this one because yeah, I think they need a lot of work. And then finally, the evoker. Well, the obvious thing is the charge time needs to go. I think absolutely Ramu, Ifrit, Shiva, Titan, 100% need to just cast the turn you cast it. I think maybe Bahamut and Phoenix can have the charge turn, but it's tricky. And that's the main thing they need, honestly. I think they should have the random call summon unpromoted. It's not that good, and having access to it from the beginning helps them with their spell slots. And it's random anyway, which is already a pretty big debuff. Given that it's hard to learn the summons, and you don't really get a lot of choice, I think they all need to be viable. So I think Unicorn needs a bit of a buff. I need Golem needs a bit of a buff. The slow charge ones 100% need to be changed. Now, I can say, yes, they maybe shouldn't do double damage if you can cast them instantly. And we're trying to differentiate a black mage from a summoner. I get it. If we really want to focus on differentiation, give them a recharge turn the turn after. Let me do Ramu's double damage, lightning to everything, and then lose my next turn. That one wouldn't feel as bad as waiting a turn to cast it. Maybe if they have priority on the second turn, that's enough to kind of give them the edge. It's still, I don't think, enough. Like, if they always went first, like the Leaping Boots Dragoon, that would help, because then you could get the enchant and anti-spell effects at the beginning of a round, which might actually matter. And then on the second turn, you would at least cast your spell immediately. I think that's the minimum for a summoner to be usable. But ideally, I'd rather they didn't waste a turn at all. I'd rather they recover after the fact, basically, if you're going to do that. other than that, it's hard, right? Because I definitely feel like the developer was trying to make them feel different than Blue Mage, Black Mage, Geommancer, like trying to get like unique mechanics for these classes rather than just be another Black Mage. But like, oh, it just feels so bad, right? Rydia, the summoner class in Final Fantasy 3 and 5, using Espers to summon in 6, using Materia in 7, the summon Materia. None of that has a wait a whole turn and then cast a spell thing, right? Like that's, I don't know where that mechanic is coming from. I don't think it's good. My best guess is it's kind of like how some spells have like a charge time in Final Fantasy 4. I think Meteor was the one mostly known for it that took so long to cast that it was basically worthless. And I think really, like, in my memory, like that's kind of the problem with those charged spells, that they're not in very many games because they're not very good and people generally don't use them. Even if they're very powerful, it just takes too long. So in most of these kinds of combats, it's not great. And at least in those games, you could cast haste to increase the speed of the active time system, at least, which would kind of help with the slow spells. We don't get anything like that here. I guess the Time Mage has something a little bit like that, but you know, we shouldn't be relying on the Time Mage to fix the summoner. That's not fair. I need the summoner to stand alone, basically. So there it is, 3 hours in, mega episode. Happy holidays, happy new year, all that stuff. Let me know what you think about my tier list and some of my suggested fixes. I still have some more experimentation to do for some of these classes, but I have a feeling I won't change too much unless there's a balance patch for Final Fantasy Renaissance. The order, at least, I'm pretty happy with. Even if it's on the same tier, there might be a couple minor tweaks. It's pretty close to what I think is fair. Does that mean the best party, excluding the Time Mage, is Fighter, Red Mage, Blue Mage, Dragoon? Yeah, actually, it might be. That sounds like a pretty awesome party. I mean, yeah, Fighter in the top slot, Dragoon in the second slot, Red and Blue in the back. That would crush. Absolutely crush the game. I guarantee it. It would feel real good from the beginning to the end. So, I don't know if that's the optimal combination. I mean, there's too many combinations, but that, just taking the A tier here would be awesome. And most of the B tier is solid too. It's just, yeah, I think the A tier are kind of leagues ahead of everyone else. Alright, that's all for now. Thanks for listening and watching and enjoying the music and my rambling. And enjoy the holidays if you got them. We'll see if we get any snow for me. Vancouver, not a lot of snow usually. Alright, have a great day. See you next year.